Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101. Set sail again. After such a busy schedule, the maintenance cycle of the entire spacecraft is finally coming to an end. The 10-month construction period is exactly the same. After all, this is the result of the precise calculation of artificial intelligence. On this day, all the living people on the Zhuoxia were waiting in the hangar for the completion of the final inspection, which meant that they could finally leave this hellhole. They were very happy, and another reason was that the day of payroll was coming. They had been lying down and collecting salaries during this period. However, as the payday approached, the boss Fanny, who realized this, was frowning. She even sent a message for help in the hyperspace active group. All my money was given to Fenyi, that stupid woman. What should I do if I don't have money to pay salaries now? Mo said. I left a backup fund. Fanny said. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that the money in the account you left was also spent by me. What a spendthrift woman. Mo was so angry that he couldn't speak. This was really bad news for Nanling and Liji, because they were all waiting for the rice to cook. So Nanling couldn't help asking, aren't we going to sell this planet? That way that boss will have money again. Mo said, the value of this planet is actually hard to estimate. Do you think the things grown or the animals raised on this planet are edible? Nanling understood immediately. Of course, they can't be eaten. Because the inert protons here have extremely strong energy interference characteristics, which is almost the same as poison for humans of this era. How many people have their organs already prosthetically assisted? The most feared are those who have not yet been fully prosthetically assisted and rely on nanoscale instruments to maintain life. If they take a bite of the black apple, they will really be poisoned to death. And for those who follow that cultivation route, if they eat a meal of the food here, the auxiliary instrument will probably lose its function. In short, this place cannot be used as an administrative planet for the time being. Even if it is used as a scientific research planet, it can be very valuable. But from this perspective, it is more reliable to keep this planet in one's hands. In addition, the Zhuoxia has just transformed the inert proton cloaking system with the harvest here. Perhaps keeping this technology in one's hands can bring greater long-term benefits. This is also the key to Fanny's hesitation. However, at this moment, Nanling reminded, our valuable gains on this planet are not just this planet. Mo, who was thinking very quickly and cooperating more and more tacitly, thought of the key point at once. She said, yes, that king insect is an experimental sample that the scientific community outside is eager to find. Let's sell it. Fanny was stunned for a moment, and then nodded happily and said, okay, let's sell it. Nanling and Mo were a little surprised. Why was Fanny so easy to talk to this time? Didn't she want to keep the king insect as a pet? However, everyone soon found the reason. That is, this scumbag who loves new things and hates old things has long ignored the chubby white pig. Of course, this is also related to some changes that have quietly occurred in the white pig. Anyway, when Nanling accidentally saw this white pig, he found that it was changing more and more into the form of a person. It was turning into a frail teenager. Nanling was shocked at the time. It was going to become a spirit. But then Fanny explained, it is trying to change into this form to arouse my sympathy. It is such a cunning guy and so tenacious. She saw this surprisingly clearly. Perhaps it was the result of so many years of elite education. Of course, it was more likely that she herself was so skilled that she was not easily tempted by this. So the matter was settled, and the Pluto system would not be sold for the time being, and the king insect would be sold instead. It is expected that this king insect can also be sold for about 1 billion, after all, its significance is only research value. Moreover, although the Pluto locust was once an enemy of mankind, it was defeated tens of thousands of years ago. I'm afraid that the collection value of buying it back will be greater than the research value. Fanny did not care about this. This money was not much for her, but at least it was an important operating expense for the current Zhuoxia. Finally, after 10 months of maintenance, Zhuoxia completely restored its function and could ascend again. Everyone returned to their posts, waiting for the moment when the spacecraft took off. Nanling was in his room, looking down at the 4 black apple trees outside, wondering if the spaceship would crush them when it took off. To his surprise, as the anti-gravity engine on the Zhuoxia was turned on, the huge spaceship actually floated a little distance silently, and then slowly reversed out. This reversing was extremely precise, perfectly avoiding the 4 apple trees. Nanling was touched by this scene. After all, these 4 trees could be said to have witnessed their experience on this planet. If they could survive, they would become the earliest life on this planet in the next era. The spaceship slowly drove out of the previously converted dock without touching anything. Then it floated upwards, and finally adjusted its posture to fly into the sky. The initial speed was not fast. After all, the interstellar engine was used differently in the atmosphere. And when the spaceship rushed out of the atmosphere with a posture of continuous and slow acceleration, its acceleration began to increase. They did not enter hyperspace flight immediately. Instead, it continued to fly outward at a speed close to the speed of light, and then suddenly entered the hyperspace a moment after it rushed out of the coverage of the inert proton matter. This was done to locate its own position. The moment it flew out of the range of the inert proton matter, the Zhuoxia confirmed its own position. Then it immediately entered the hyperspace to prevent others with ulterior motives on the ship from knowing the specific location of the Pluto system. Including the many gains, including the ghost saucer, were actually only circulated among the top 4. During the hyperspace flight, the hyperspace active group suddenly became lively. And because Li Ji also joined in, Fanny also upgraded the computing power of this group, so that there was a data space in the group. Everyone can appear directly as a data avatar in this data space. At this time, their data avatars appeared here together, and then the scene of the bridge was directly projected here, and they could even directly control the spacecraft here. Nanling asked first, "Are we going to Tianzeng Star?" Fanny said, "No, let's go back to Chenyuan 06 first." Nanling asked in surprise, "Why?" Fanny sighed and said, "The moment the contact was restored just now, I received a lot of information. Many of them are from Ginyu, and many are from Fenman Man looking for me, and even many are sent to me by people Fenyu doesn't know." Nanling realized what was going on as soon as he heard it, and he said, "Yes, Boss Fanny has been missing for 10 months, and her family must be worried crazy." Fanny curled her lips and said, "Oh, those things are so annoying. I was invited by Fenman Man, and I must show up in Chenyuan 06, otherwise my father will bring the Chiling fleet of Ginyu here in person. Very good, this is the real eldest lady, with a daddy behind her who will get angry for her at any time." Chapter 102. Pasted. This hyperspace flight only takes 3 to 5 days. According to the positioning just now, the Pluto galaxy is only about 60 light-years away from the border of the wind region. So after setting the route this time, everyone didn't do anything, but used the robots and intelligent systems on the ship to continuously check and troubleshoot the entire ship to ensure that all equipment is in normal operation. After all, it has just been overhauled, and no one can guarantee whether the ship is really in good condition. Everyone was busy, but there were no major problems. Only Nanling found that the maintenance work of the robots entrusted to Laomu seemed to have some minor flaws. That was because many details were not maintained in place, resulting in the aging of some parts. Nanling sighed secretly, thinking that such meticulous work could not be entrusted to these people. He didn't say anything, operated the robot to replace all the aging parts, and then made up for the meticulous maintenance. There is no need to make a big deal about such a small matter, and he would not go out to publicize it. Anyway, now that his brain computing power has increased, he can already use all the computing power of the intelligent core, and this computing power loss can also be avoided. And just when he was busy, the alarm on the ship suddenly sounded again. Zhuoxia. This ship is being locked, and an enemy ship is tracking it. Familiar plot, it seems to be happening again. However, at this time, the projection of Fanny in the data space was laughing strangely. Everyone was speechless watching her showing off. "I knew that those guys would come to trouble us again." Mo frowned and said, "The locator removed from CK was not destroyed." Fanny smiled and said, "How could I bear to destroy it? If it was really destroyed, how could I catch such a big fish?" "Very good, now everyone knows that it was this unlucky Anai who came to the door on purpose." Nanling could only smile helplessly, and then returned to his body and began to prepare. Sure enough, the next moment, Zhuoxia ejected from the hyperspace flight. This is a very normal move. After all, it was at a disadvantage in this regard last time. If it was someone else, would they react faster? But just when they escaped from the hyperspace and came to this empty void, there were already many signs of distortion of the hyperspace jump landing point around them. Obviously, they have been surrounded. However, Fanny gave an order. Start the stealth mode. The next moment, the different energy components on the spacecraft began to switch. Nanling saw that the outer surface of the spacecraft was first covered with a layer of light gray material, which was the inert proton flow released by the ghost saucer. Then the optical camouflage function that Nanling participated in debugging was turned on. The entire zooxia flashed and disappeared completely in the starry sky. Nanling put on his Hurricane armor, the complete version of the Hurricane armor. Staying on Pluto for such a long time was enough for him to complete this set of armor. He quickly came to the hangar and was ready to attack at any time. Here, he also saw Mo, who had already put on the Wuzo armor, and Dim Zoshu and Taoki, who were also ready to attack. When Mo saw him come in, he came to him and looked at him, then patted him on the shoulder and said, "It looks good." Nanling waited solemnly for the boss to review. That's right, Mo is now his boss, because he was able to complete this set of Hurricane armor thanks to the money borrowed by Boss Mo. He had already spent all his own money, and his boss Fanny's salary had not been paid, so of course he could only live by borrowing money. Now Mo was his creditor. At the same time, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but Mo was more considerate of this little brother who owed him money. At this time, there were a total of 4 people on the zooxia who could attack, which was indeed a little less. But there was no way, after all, these 4 people were elite. The 4 of them entered the combat position one after another. Because of the small number of people, they would also be the last melee defensive force of this ship. The 4 of them came to the launch pad in the hangar to fix themselves, and then the current state of the zooxia was projected in front of them. In the picture with the zooxia as the main perspective, circles of space ripples appeared around, a total of 12, which was the scale of a medium-sized fleet. However, at this moment, Fanny's voice directly made Nanling and Mo fainted, and she shouted, "Stick to it, stick to it." Obviously, they designed 2 modes for this ship. The first mode is the long-range sniper mode, and the second mode is the lurking mode. To be honest, according to their original thoughts, they must have used the first mode to test it first, but Fanny directly turned on the second mode. Seeing that Mo was not on the bridge, she let herself go. Fanny Mo groaned, and then reluctantly did not want to speak, obviously tired. At this time, 12 starships appeared from the space jump. Among them, there were 4 large battleships and 8 medium-sized battleships, a very standard medium-sized fleet configuration. Mo said at this time, "Except for the flagship that I can't understand, the others are old-fashioned battleships, not to worry about. The Dark Death Star of the Death Star pirates, it seems that they really want to deal with us, but why is this? This is indeed difficult for people to understand, because the 10 months of the disappearance of the zooxia must have touched the nerves of the 2 major forces of Fennu and Gu. Because the zooxia disappeared near Fennu, and before leaving, it was obviously in conflict with the Fen family members of Chenyuan 06, it is really hard to escape the relationship. As for the ancient domain, well, the eldest lady's father has rushed over with a knife. Facing an old father who is ready to kill people at any time, how can the Death Star pirates have the courage to commit crimes at this time? At this time, the zooxia is quietly attached to a large battleship. This battleship is not really backward, but it can't catch up with the latest main battleships of major forces. But even so, the zooxia still secretly attached to it, and then opened the gun hatch that was modified by Nanling's main control. On one side of the zooxia, a total of 12 gun hatches were opened, and then 12 large Gauss heavy guns of almost 5 meters high were moved out from inside. Such Gauss heavy guns are enough to accelerate any metal projectile to 100 times the speed of sound. And kinetic impact is not the main killing method of this heavy gun. Its real lethality lies in the special warhead made by Nanling for it. Bang! A dull chorus came from the zooxia. This was Fanny opening fire without martial ethics. 12 Gauss heavy guns fired at the same time, spraying thousands of special warheads. That's right, these 12 Gauss heavy guns are all big guns, and they all shoot shotgun shells. The battleship was probably confused and completely unprepared. How could the enemy fire so close to it? The thousands of projectiles were covered with a special material shell that was highly resistant to energy. When passing through the energy shield, they withstood the erosion for a short moment, and then sent the high explosive armor-piercing projectiles with real lethality into the shield before they were completely eroded. And then, a series of terrible explosions unfolded on the side of the battleship. Even though that battleship's external armor was thick, it was blown open by the bombardment of high explosive armor-piercing shells. This battleship now looks like a Sith, and it looks extremely desolate. Chapter 103 Rage Mode. That battleship was really miserable, the mess was unbearable to look at. But in fact, its main body was not damaged, only the outer armor was blown up badly. But it couldn't survive the second round of attacks. Nanling specially considered the idea of fast ammunition replacement when designing this Gauss shotgun heavy artillery system. At this time, an empty magazine was ejected and entered the recovery device to reload, and the new magazine was immediately loaded. The whole process took no more than 5 seconds. What can be done in these 5 seconds on the interstellar battlefield? I'm afraid there are really not many things that can be done. So another explosion and fire lit up. This time the explosion was much more serious, mainly because the important compartments of the large battleship were affected, and then a series of secondary explosions occurred. And in such a miserable situation, the Vuoxia disappeared quietly. The stealth mode was turned on again, and it just disappeared from the detection of all enemy ships. And in this process, the Vuoxia did not suffer any effective attack. On the bridge, Fanny was laughing wildly. She was too proud. These people from the Death Star pirates want to beat her. Then be prepared to be beaten by her in return. This Death Star Pirates actually has a medium-sized fleet, especially their starships, which are obviously retired main battleships from some major forces. And the Dark Death Star is directly at the level of the latest main battleship, which shows that there must be a big force behind it. But so what, if you provoke Miss Fanny, you must be beaten to death. The burning cloud quietly started up and came to the side of another main battleship like a ghost in the starry sky. Then it was the same method, repeating the scene just now. Nanling looked at another enemy battleship in the screen and was silent in the explosion, and his heart was completely tense. Because he knew that no matter how stupid the opponent was, he had to react. Sure enough, when the burning cloud disappeared again, the remaining Death Star Pirates fleet all released drones to fill the surrounding airspace for defense. It was under this situation that Fanny ordered the burning cloud to be driven under the opponent's flagship, the Dark Death Star. This was an extremely cunning position. That side only had to face the 2 rows of cannons on the lower deck of the Dark Death Star, while the cannons on both sides of the Vuoxia's own hull could fire at an elevated angle. Moreover, because the other 12 starships were trying to surround the Vuoxia, the formation was very wide and no star realm was specially arranged to guard the lower deck of the Dark Death Star. As a result, the Vuoxia was facing the white and tender belly of the Dark Death Star. The next moment, a total of 24 cannons on both sides fired upwards at the same time. A series of fireworks exploded on the energy shield of the Dark Death Star. This scene was very beautiful, but Mo's face had changed and said, "Everyone, attack." As soon as the voice fell, the 4 people, including Nanling and herself, bounced off the fixed frame together, and came to the outer shell of the Vuoxia starship through the ejection channel to fix it. The shield of the Dark Death Star was too thick. Even after just experiencing hyperspace flight, Nanling's warhead specially made for the energy shield could not penetrate the shield of this most advanced main battleship. Just the next moment, the counterattack from the Dark Death Star came. Although it was still 2 rows of naval gun beams bombarding, the huge size of the Dark Death Star could still burst out fierce firepower. The 2 sides began to exchange fire at this moment. The Dark Death Star did not have any obvious weaknesses, and the firepower of this bottom of the ship was only relatively weak. But even so, the number of its naval guns in this direction could still be compared with the number of naval guns of the Burning Cloud. The only thing that the Burning Cloud was far superior to the opponent was the shotgun firing mode. The output at this moment was simply explosive. It also made an extremely cruel challenge to the opponent's energy shield. The opponent's shield was originally 300,000 scales, because it had just ended hyperspace flight, so it only hit 200,000 scales when it appeared. This was still terribly thick. However, the Burning Cloud could knock down the opponent's shield of 37,000 scales with a single salvo, which was a fierce firepower. This kind of firepower, in fact, only needs 2 or 3 rounds of salvos, which is enough to blow off the shields of some old battleships, not to mention that this is a warhead specifically targeting shields. Another fierce point is that the firing frequency of the Gauss shotgun is too high, 1 round every 5 seconds. This firepower is terrible. The Dark Death Star only persisted for 3 rounds of attack, and then immediately forced into hyperspace navigation. However, this obviously had a huge impact on the Dark Death Star. Its shield showed obvious signs of instability when entering hyperspace, and there was a faint flame in the engine part, which seemed to be overloaded. The appearance of the Burning Cloud on the battlefield this time was undoubtedly a great success. The only bad thing was that Fanny used the lurking mode as the violent mode. Only new ships like the Dark Death Star can enter hyperspace twice in a row. As for other starships, it is amazing that they did not retreat. Instead, after the Dark Death Star left, they suddenly opened fire and concentrated fire on the burning cloud. Even though that burning cloud was among them, it was the same, not caring whether their attacks would accidentally hurt friendly forces. Of course, considering the span of space, it was rare for their own spaceship to be hit. The Death Star pirates could not actually lock onto the burning cloud. They used firepower coverage and fuzzy algorithms to roughly estimate the flight trajectory of the burning cloud for concentrated fire. This was the only way to succeed. However, the burning cloud's shield was also strong, and the firepower falling on it could not cause much impact. Seeing this, Fanny simply lost her temper. Since she couldn't catch the big fish, she must not let go of these small fish and shrimps. She simply shuttled through the enemy starships at high speed, avoiding stopping and being concentrated fire, while constantly attacking and tearing apart the enemy's fleet. The main reason was that she couldn't stay in one place for too long this time to prevent becoming the target of concentrated fire, so now the burning cloud basically attacked those medium-sized warships. Every time she passed by, it would cause considerable damage to a warship. If it had not been unable to stay in one place to avoid concentrated fire, the Vuoxia could have completely destroyed those medium-sized warships one by one. Of course, the Vuoxia itself was also under great pressure from the crossfire. Holes were punched in the shield. This is a very advanced shield mode, which is to use the collapse of a small range of shield units to divert higher level damage. But this technology is obviously not mature, and there is a long buffer period for its collapse and recovery after energy dissipation. Therefore, the shield of the Vuoxia did not drop quickly, but it did not dare to stay in places with dense firepower. But while the shield unit was reading the bar, it was inevitable that some drones and gardenchays would rush in. At this time, it was up to Nanling and others. Chapter 104. Whirlwind Technique. Nanling was a little nervous. This was his first time to participate in a space battle of this level. Although he didn't understand why the enemy would attack the Vuoxia so desperately, it didn't prevent him from focusing on the battlefield in front of him. Their combat missions were naturally assigned by Vuoxia. Even as an AI, it could constantly adjust the task allocation according to everyone's performance. At this moment, a red light spot was projected on Nanling's retina. He looked in the direction of the light spot and saw a drone just passing through the gap of the Vuoxia shield unit and entering a more dangerous area. Nanling saw this without saying a word, and immediately moved towards the drone, while raising his hand to the drone. At this moment, the hurricane armor on his body changed. This was the hurricane armor that he spent all his savings and borrowed a large sum of money to successfully build. The cost was even 10 times more than he had thought. Why is this? It's because there are too many pendants on the hurricane armor. The hurricane armor is now completed and is dark green in color. Compared to the close-fitting inner armor, the upper body looks quite burly because different components are installed on the back, shoulders and chest armor. The waist is surrounded by a circle of unique energy pipelines, forming a belt-like structure. There are 6 slots on this belt, and now only 3 slots are inserted with metal rune plates. This is the talisman of this era, which solidifies the spell on the combat armor in this way. The materials for making each talisman are close to 10,000, plus the exchange price of its spell. The total price of each one is 100,000. Of course, spells are not that expensive, but mainly he has to fail 7 times on average to make a talisman. What a painful expense. It is precisely because of this that he originally planned to make 6 talismans, but he only made 3, and he owed Boss Mo a lot of money. At this time, a talisman on his waist lit up, and the spirit furnace on his chest poured into it a majestic spiritual power, and then suddenly activated it in his palm. Wind cannon technique. The gust of wind was like a cannon, fiercely bombarding the drone. It instantly broke its wings, and then caused its main body to spin out of control and fly backwards. It finally hit the inner side of the shield of the Vuoxia on the other side, turning into a ball of fireworks. The power of this attack was absolutely outstanding. If it was performed in the atmosphere, it might be able to scrape off the grass and soil within a 10-meter range. This is not the ability of a foundation-building cultivator. Even this ability does not require any part of his power to participate in the regulation. The spiritual power in the spirit furnace directly transmits the violent spiritual power into the metal talisman plate through the spiritual line of the combat armor, so that it is transformed into a manic spell in the form of a talisman, and then guided and stimulated by the wisdom core. Even this wind cannon technique is a whirlwind technique specially developed for combat armor. The simple and crude operation of spiritual power is not suitable for the human body at all, at least not for the human body in the foundation building period. This was his first time to experience the whirlwind technique, and he only felt that it was bland and had no sense of participation at all. However, at this time, another enemy appeared, and Xiaoxia had immediately assigned him a task. He hurried in that direction. Another rune lit up on the belt, this time it was the rune of dancing in the air. This was a wind-based flying spell that could be flexible both inside and outside the atmosphere. However, it could only work under the coordination of the mind core. But Nanling was no longer satisfied with the simple control of the mind core. Anyway, the mind core had been completely mastered by him, so he simply separated some of his own spiritual power from his body and integrated it into this spell, and then he found that this dancing in the air suddenly became smooth. Originally controlled by the mind core, although dancing in the air was flexible, there was always a certain conversion buffer during rapid changes of direction, which made the whole movement feel frustrated. But when his own spiritual power was integrated into it, the moment of conversion frustration disappeared completely. He started and stopped quickly, turned and moved on the surface of the Xiaoxia, without any pause, and was terrifyingly agile. And he soon found the other enemy plane, raised his palm to activate the wind cannon again. At this time, his mind moved, and he separated some of his spiritual power again to participate in it. Then the air cannon shot out. This time, the enemy plane had already discovered his attack and immediately made an evasive move. However, the wind cannon he fired suddenly turned around and hit the opponent's flank as if it could track him. The most concentrated point of the wind cannon explosion was exactly at the engine of the drone. Boom! This directly blew up the opponent. Nanling was very satisfied with this. Because this was the blessing brought by the talent-flowing wind. It allowed these wind techniques developed for war to be integrated into Nanling's own personal will, allowing them to change in his hands. He really liked his talent, which was rated as mediocre by the intelligence core data, more and more. He felt that with this combination, he could play too many tricks. For this reason, he even thought of what to use for the fourth symbol board. He didn't have any thoughts about those powerful whirlwind techniques, and his thoughts completely slid into another direction. At this time, Mo's voice suddenly came from the communication. Focus, don't let your mind wander during the battle. Mo scolded. Nanling came back to his senses immediately after hearing this, and found that he had released another enemy aircraft and even an enemy mecha into the defense zone while he was distracted. He quickly raised both hands and fired a wind cannon at each of the two targets. Of course, the drone was hit by the tracking wind cannon again, and then turned into flames. The mecha was 15 or 16 meters tall, with a strong body and thick armor. The wind cannon technique could not cause much damage to it when it hit its front. And because of Nanling's attack, the mecha driver obviously discovered his position, and then adjusted the direction and rushed towards him. Nanling immediately searched for the model of this mecha in the intelligence core, and then calmly released 3 wind cannons in a row towards the sky. The mecha once again resisted. But the 3 wind cannons suddenly dispersed to the side at the same time, and then surrounded the mecha in the middle with the power of 3 talents. At the same time, Nanling had read all the information of the mecha and made a judgment. That is, it is not a purely combat mecha outside the atmosphere, but a land mecha modified by adding a flight pack. This is very easy to deal with. 3 wind cannons suddenly rotated and hit the flight pack behind the mecha, causing the mecha driver to turn around in a hurry, trying to avoid such an attack. But he obviously had not encountered such a flexible attack. Even if he knocked down a wind cannon with a mechanical arm, 2 wind cannons still hit the flight pack on his back. Instantly, a ball of fire exploded behind it, and instantly blew the mecha into the Xiaoxia. Boom! A dull vibration came from the deck of the Xiaoxia. As a result, the mecha hit the hull armor and then rebounded violently into the external void. Without the power system, it was completely out of control. In the end, it was thrown behind by the rapidly advancing Xiaoxia, and then hit the inside of the energy shield behind it, turning into a ball of fire again. Nanling breathed a sigh of relief. He found that he was getting more and more used to this combat environment. His blood was boiling, and his innate combat instinct began to awaken. At this moment, he suddenly realized a reality. Maybe he was meant to be a warrior. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 105 Chapter 104 Boarding Operation. Nanling's fighting instinct was activated. This was the restlessness from his genes, as if he was born to be a warrior. This situation had already been hinted at. He had already shown signs of this when he was playing with weapons. Now it was just that this was thoroughly demonstrated on the interstellar battlefield. It was this point that made Nanling realize that his life experience might not be the best. The best guess was that he was a young master of a branch of the Feng family or the Gu family, and was stranded outside because of some accidents. But now it seems that this guess is not accurate. After all, how could a normal young master write such content into his genes? Refer to Miss Fanny of the Gu family and Miss Feng Yi of the Feng family. They are all real all-rounders. Nanling felt that the genetic adjustment that would be biased towards combat was probably only done by specially trained dead soldiers, right? Nanling couldn't help but feel a little worried about his life experience. The battle was still going on. His cultivation was at the first level of foundation building, and the ability displayed by the Hurricane armor was very powerful. Even more capable than Ding Xiaoshu and Taoqi at the same level. Both of them were at the 4th or 5th level of foundation building. After so many years in the White Feather Corps, they naturally had some experience. Although they might only reach the 4th or 5th level of foundation building in this life due to their body transformation, they were still experienced warriors and theoretically should not perform worse than Nanling. But the fact was that they relied too much on their own equipment and were far from being as smart in controlling power as Nanling showed on the battlefield. Nanling looked around and found that the only person who could be compared with him was Mo. On the interstellar battlefield, Mo, who had the ability to control electromagnetics, was like a goddess of war. She was actually holding the Gauss rifle that Nanling had given her. Whenever she saw a target approaching, she would raise it and shoot without even looking. The bullet in the barrel, which was accelerated to the extreme by the Gauss magnetic field, burst out and even brought about a terrifying magnetic storm. This was not the function when he made this gun. This should be Mo's own ability. Sure enough, his premonition was correct. This type of weapon in Mo's hands could definitely exert capabilities beyond their own limits. What was even more surprising was that Mo had captured a prisoner at some point. He was fixed to the surface of the burning cloud by the iron fragments and could not move. These metal fragments were no different from dough in Mo's hands, and they could change their shape at will. Nanling could only sigh as he watched. This was simply the female version of Magneto. He didn't have so many tricks to play on the battlefield, mainly because he had too few means. Mo's talent should be in electromagnetic control, which was really strong. But his flowing wind was not bad either. At this time, the burning cloud had almost destroyed the fleet by moving at high speed. When the fleet of the Death Star pirates lost more than 1/3, that is, 5 starships were blown up, the enemy finally began to retreat. After all, the enemy was numerous, and the burning cloud would not be able to catch up if they fled in a scattered manner. Nanling was relieved. If the shield of the burning cloud was not broken, then at least his work here would be over. However, they were still on standby on the surface deck of the burning cloud, and Mo obviously had another plan. Sure enough, the next moment Fanny controlled the Zhuoxia to stick to the last large battleship. Mo. Everyone prepare to board the ship. Nanling understood at once, this is the essence, this is to capture a starship. Compared with the small business of selling king bucks, this starship is the real big property. The Zhuoxia ship gun roared again, but this time only 6 ship guns fired at the same time, and the barrage of bullets only covered the ship gun area of the other starship. At most, 1 more armor-piercing shell was added to completely shut down the engine part. In this way, the ship has the qualification to be captured. The only bad thing is that the Zhuoxia has too few people for the landing operation. All these 4 people, Lao Mu's too, should actually come in theory, but they refused Fanny's inquiry. Fanny did not order them, but only asked them if they also wanted to attack. Unfortunately, the cautious and life-saving lower-class people felt that it was too dangerous to go to the landing operation with just a few people, and they didn't want to go at all. Fanny didn't force them, and asked them to continue to maintain the robots and do the repair work they were not good at. The final landing force was 5 people. Yes, Fanny had to appear in person again. When Fanny appeared on the surface of Zhuoxia from the catapult channel, she waved her hand proudly and said, "Brothers and sisters, let's go." As soon as the voice fell, her red and gold-colored Quchuaniao armor had already spewed out raging flames, and then suddenly took off and flew towards the starship. Seeing this, the others hurriedly followed. The Quchuaniao with its wings spread suddenly hit the outer layer of the opponent's deck. The outer deck that had been smashed by the Zhuoxia ship's guns was instantly torn apart, revealing a terrible big hole. Fanny rushed in so impatiently, and then waited for everyone at the entrance of the hole. Nanling arrived 1 body behind Mo, waiting for the boss to continue to give orders. Fanny nodded to him and said, Xiaonan, follow me to the bridge. Mo, you go to deal with their artificial intelligence, and you two go to clean up their hangar. Ding Xiaoshu and Taoqi looked at each other, both showing an embarrassed and bitter expression. This kind of work seemed too difficult for them. They asked the two of them to do it. Were they being used as super soldiers? But they knew they had to obey now, otherwise there would be big problems. So they finally obeyed the order. Seeing this, Fanny comforted them and said, Don't worry, I'm not asking you to die. Second Officer Li Ji on the Zhuoxia will remotely command the combat robot troops to support you. But before Mo solves the opponent's artificial intelligence, Second Officer Li Ji needs you to be the signal relay. Do you understand? The two came to their senses and realized that Miss Fanny was still kind and didn't really want them to die. To be honest, after being confused and making a fuss with CK, they were already pleasantly surprised to be able to gain this level of trust. Nanling rushed towards the bridge with Boss Fanny. This was also easy to understand, because in Fanny's heart, Nanling was probably the weakest subordinate in frontal combat and needed to be well protected by herself. However, she didn't know that at the same time, Mo had sent a private message to Nanling. You must hold Fanny by your side, don't let her rush too hard alone. Also, protect her back, she tends to ignore the people behind her, I believe you have the ability to do it. Nanling agreed one by one, and then followed Fanny and disappeared into the passage leading to the bridge. At this time, he felt that Fanny's description of Mo was still correct in some aspects. What an old mother. Chapter 106 Mechanical Oracle. Along the passage, many automatic weapons were aimed at this side. However, Fanny, who had turned into a phoenix, ignored these attacks and burned and destroyed all the defensive forces along the way. She rushed straight to the bridge. Nanling followed behind and really only needed to shout 666. The whole journey was peaceful and went straight to the bridge. The bridge was empty, without any human figures. Nanling had actually been alerted when he saw this. All he encountered along the way were counterattacks from automatic weapons. So where were the people? Is there no one alive on this spaceship? There was nothing on that bridge. Fanny paced around a little unhappily, and then saw a button representing communication on the bridge console flashing. Is there a communication coming in? She was about to press it. Nanling saw this and quickly grabbed her and said, Be careful, what if it's a trap set by the enemy? As he said that, he had already thrown out a stream of air, and then the air quickly turned into the shape of a finger under his spiritual power control, and pressed on the button. This cautious look made Fanny roll her eyes. She found that Nanling was nagging less around her, but the feeling of being watched and protected never diminished. When the communication was connected, a three-dimensional picture appeared on the bridge, which looked very eerie in the red light of the surrounding alarm. It was a very large body, sitting upright on a large mechanical chair. It was like a huge robot, and its scarlet electronic eyes occasionally flashed a chilling light. It spoke. "Give Fanny, I finally see you." Fanny was silent for a while, took off the outer armor helmet of the Blackbird armor, and revealed her face with only a transparent mask. Her expression was solemn and serious, and she obviously had too many doubts about this enemy who had targeted her many times. Nanling stood behind Fanny and carefully guarded the surroundings, with all gaseous perception turned on. He always felt that this was a trap. Fanny said lightly, "Black Death Emperor?" Just called a name, and then she didn't say anything more. The boss of the Death Star Pirates is a terrifying existence called Black Death Emperor. It is rumored that he has already uploaded his consciousness to the superbrain and become an immortal digital life. Digital life, that is not a digital god. But those who can become digital life are also extremely powerful. Nanling became more cautious, because facing digital life, he really didn't know when he would be attacked. He thought about it and simply took off his intelligence core. What if the unreliable intelligence core is hacked again? The Black Death Emperor rumbled like a subwoofer. "Give Fanny, aren't you curious why I have targeted you so many times?" Fanny did not hesitate and said proudly, "There is no need to know, because I will find you and then completely destroy you." The Black Death Emperor praised, "You are worthy at being Miscu. Your family does have the ability to do this. It's just that the decision to destroy you is not made by me. Even if you destroy me and my Death Star Pirates, there'll still be others who will continue to cause trouble for you until you die." Fanny was a little surprised. It seemed that she really had a lot of trouble. But the question is, when did she get into these troubles? The Black Death Emperor said, "There is a great one among us. He has been predicting the future of mankind and choosing the path that is most beneficial to mankind among the countless possible prophecies. We were originally on that path. until you and your ship appeared. When it set sail from Chinuano 6, the Great Oracle suddenly found that the chosen future had changed, and everything became unpredictable. Nanling was greatly shocked when he heard this. He never thought that there would be such a thing as prophecy in this era. But compared to Fanny, the shock he showed was much better. Because Fanny was obviously stunned when she heard the name Oracle. At this moment, Nanling noticed the change. At the moment when Fanny lost consciousness, he noticed that a certain device on the bridge seemed to move all of a sudden. He turned his head and saw that the device suddenly unfolded. While turning into a robot or a prosthesis, it also had a dangerous muzzle pointed at Fanny. This muzzle gave Nanling a very dangerous feeling. His newly awakened fighting instinct told him that it was something that could cause fatal damage to him. However, it was on the side of Fanny, and Fanny was in a trance and didn't see it. Nanling remembered Mo's care for him, asking him to protect Fanny's back. According to the general plot at this time, he should rush over to block the bullet for the young lady, and then be lucky enough to survive and get the gratitude of the young lady. Maybe he can start the peak plot of his life next. However, Nanling was afraid of death. Seeing that Fanny was really not prepared at all, he directly fired a wind cannon technique at Fanny without saying a word. Good guy, Mo asked him to guard against the attack from Fanny's back, but he personally came from behind her. Boom. Fanny's body was blown away. Even if she reacted, it was too late. After all, the wind cannon technique was a whirlwind technique. She flew in a whirl and stuck directly to the porthole of the bridge. Nanling was quite nostalgic when he saw this, thinking that he had stuck to it in the past, but he stuck it on the outside. At the moment she flew away, a crystal bullet almost brushed Fanny's scalp and shot through the cabin of the bridge silently. A sharp whistling sound came. That was the thick armor of the bridge being penetrated, and the internal airflow was pouring out rapidly. Nanling ignored this, watching the thing that fired the gun quickly changing from a device to a humanoid machine, and quickly shifting the muzzle to continue shooting at Fanny. He quickly opened his last symbol board and activated the windshield technique on it. This is also a whirlwind technique. The principle is to form a shield with highly dense gas, which can resist decent kinetic energy impact and energy attack. Of course, this thing will naturally have another change in Nanling's hands. He directly hit it with the windshield technique. The assassin obviously expected Nanling's move, so he directly threw a mechanical arm to block it. This mechanical body was obviously made of some special metal. Nanling's windshield was like paper in front of it. It was smashed to pieces in an instant. Nanling could even feel that the internal magic structure of his windshield was dismantled at that moment. He never doubted that the technology of this era would definitely have means to target practitioners. He just didn't expect that it could be cracked so easily. But his reaction was very fast. He had already responded when the windshield was broken. He integrated his own spiritual power into it, and then guided the scattered wind to blow up a small storm. This is not a spell, but a storm guided by his flowing wind talent. At this time, the fist was also swung over and hit Nanling's arm. He felt a sharp pain in his arm, and then the whole person flew backwards. Even wearing hurricane armor, he couldn't resist the huge force. It was confirmed that this was not a character he could deal with. This assassin was too arrogant. But his actions were not useless, because the second shot at Fanny deviated again. Because its body was shaken by the violent airflow caused by flowing wind. As a Jindan cultivator, Fanny would not wait until the third bullet arrived to wake up, no matter how bad she was, right? At this moment, Nanling seemed to see a phoenix bathing in fire appear on the bridge, and then the raging flames filled the entire bridge, only forming a blank space without fire around him. The communication of the Black Death Emperor immediately jumped and was about to be interrupted at any time. But before the communication was disconnected, he said in a deep voice, "Give Fanny, this is not over yet." Nanling took a breath. The scorching heat around him could not affect him, but his arm was too painful. Should the bones be broken? Moreover, the hurricane armor was also deformed by the impact, which in turn pressed on the flesh and bones of his arm, adding to the injuries, which made him miserable. But he had no time to pay attention to the pain in his body now. The battle situation in the Sea of Fire was what he was concerned about. If Fanny lost, he would be very, very dangerous. But he knew that he was no longer useful at this time, which made him very uncomfortable. So, the hurricane armor was not enough. Unfortunately, this hurricane armor has only been worn for the first day, but in Nanling's mind it has already been considered an outdated equipment that needs to be eliminated. Chapter 107 Who is the prophecy about? Finally, the fire subsided, and Fanny walked to Nanling with a mechanical head in one hand. She looked at Nanling's bloody hand that had been pressed by the deformed armor, and said with a touching look, "Thank you, you saved me twice this time." Nanling was quite moved, thinking that it would be enough if she could remember his kindness. Every time he acted with Fanny, he seemed to be in trouble. He just hoped that Miss would remember her kindness and give her more rewards. Unexpectedly, Fanny turned around and said with gritted teeth, "But I will remember that you took advantage of my unpreparedness to knock me away." Did she look like she was ready to take revenge at any time? Nanling thought this was too hateful. But the next moment, Fanny still bent down and helped him up and said, "If the Black Death Emperor hadn't taken advantage of my mental shock to temporarily mislead my intelligence core, the assassin wouldn't have succeeded so easily. But you saw it, right? What do you think about this?" Nanling felt that this was a warning to him not to talk nonsense everywhere, and quickly stated, "I have little experience and don't understand anything." Fanny: "Oh, you don't know, then I'll tell you. Let's start with the Oracle. The so-called Oracle is actually one of the earliest digital gods. It is said that he has summarized all the information of the entire human society and constantly deduced the direction of human development. He is also the greatest prophet in the world." Obviously, Fanny didn't want him to shut up, but really asked for his opinion. Nanling felt that this was not a trouble he could get involved in at all. If Fanny's enemy is a big boss of this level, how can he deal with it? He asked tentatively, "How about we hide and slowly get stronger?" Fanny asked, "How long should we hide?" It can be seen that she was under great psychological pressure after hearing the news. Nanling said, "Wait until we all become immortals, and then we will go together to kill that guy." Fanny laughed and said, "You are really good at saying that. The Oracle is a very remarkable existence. Don't think of him as a bad person. In fact, I thought about it and felt that this matter should be taken by some of the beings under the seat. After all, with the Oracle's capacity, he shouldn't attack a little girl like me. Even if he really wants to do it, it should be a thunderous force that no one can resist." After she finished speaking, she smiled brightly at Nanling and said, "Thank you for your comfort. I feel much better now. You're injured. I will take you back." As she said that, she helped Nanling up and walked back. It can be seen that she seemed unfamiliar with the action of helping people, but she tried her best. Nanling quietly let her help him and then sent him directly to the medical room. Obviously, he had to recuperate again. However, this time he only needed to repair the part of his arm, so he was not immersed in the nutrient solution while lying in the recuperation cabin. He just injected local anesthetic and let the mechanical arm perform corrective surgery on his broken arm bones. At this time, he could not do anything, but could only start to think about what happened today. To be honest, he was a little scared today. It was not because he heard any prophecy, but after learning about the terrifying power of the Oracle. If he was right, every network in the entire human society might be within its reach. Did he really just collect information and do nothing else? Is he a guardian in the dark, or a controller in the dark? Nanling had a lot of ideas. Basically, they were all dangerous. But there was no way, because of his special identity, he always couldn't help thinking about things in a bad way. Just like now, he actually felt that the prophecy might also have something to do with him. Because from the information given by the Black Death Emperor, it can be seen that the key factor is on the Zhuoxia, and the key time is when the Zhuoxia first left Chunyuan 06. If the key factors are really Zhuoxia and Fanny, then why didn't the calculation start from the time Zhuoxia left the ancient domain? What changes did Zhuoxia have when it left Chunyuan 06? Of course, there were many more crew members on board, and Nanling was one of them. So strictly speaking, Nanling himself was in this prophecy. And he is the most special, there is no doubt about that. Not only is his life experience problematic, but more importantly, his soul origin is even more problematic. If there really is such a magical prophet, then his existence is simply the biggest variable in the world. As for why the future of the prophecy will be affected only after boarding Zhuoxia, Nanling guessed that it should be a platform where variables also need to be exerted, and Zhuoxia is likely to be such a powerful platform. This speculation made him feel quite uneasy. However, he still suppressed this worry for the time being. He was still so weak, and it was useless to worry about it. Instead, the girls on the ship came to visit him after they finished their own things. Fanny said, "How is your hand?" Nanling clenched his fist and said, "It's almost healed, but I still feel a little weak. I should be completely fine after 2 days of rest." Fanny thanked him again. "Thank you, if it weren't for you, I would be in danger this time." Mo also thanked him. "Thanks to you, you're indeed a trustworthy person." Li Ji said regretfully, in fact, I suggest that you take this opportunity to change to a beautiful mechanical arm, which will be much more convenient. Nanling was very grateful for the concern of the two bosses, and automatically ignored Aunt Li Ji's suggestion. He asked, is all the work here completed? Mo nodded and said, well, we got a lot of resources from the warehouse of that starship, and this alone made us a lot of money. What's more, we also got the energy cores of a battleship and 2 medium-sized battleships, which can be sold for a lot of money. Nanling showed a happy expression when he heard this. He felt that for the current Zhuoxia, nothing could be more important than financial health. Fanny said, we will return to Chunyuan 06 next. This time, no one will come to cause trouble. Nanling nodded. It was true. As for why the Zhuoxia, which had been driven out of Chunyuan 06, had to return, this was actually a show of rectification. It was considered to be a win for Miss Fenyi in Chunyuan 06. The Zhuoxia soon entered hyperspace flight again. This time, there was indeed no disaster and returned safely. The main reason was that Fanny did not cause trouble again. This time they encountered the Death Star pirates, and she deliberately caused trouble to take revenge. In the end, she was satisfied, but Nanling was still injured. Nanling just thought it was very weird. He felt that with Fanny's weird physique that attracted disasters, it might really correspond to the prophecy. Chapter 108. Farewell now only to meet again later. The Zhuoxia returned to Chunyuan 06 again. Nanling felt quite subtle. He originally thought that he would never have the chance to come back in this life, but he did not expect to come back here again. After the Zhuoxia stopped at the port, Nanling did not think about getting off the ship. Chunyuan 06 was no longer a place he missed. The next day, a salary was transferred to his personal account. He was happy. It seemed that Boss Mo's business with Chunyuan 06 was going well. With the money, the first thing he thought of was spending. There were too many ideas in his mind to be realized. How could he not spend? The first thing he found was an unpopular spell called Storm Spell. In terms of spell difficulty, it was not even as difficult as Wind Cannon Spell. It seemed simple and crude, even basic. But Nanling needed this basic feeling. This was simply a spell that could summon a strong wind in an instant, so the difficulty was much lower when making the spell board. Nanling completed it after only 2 failures. After completing it, he was naturally happy and could not help but buy some other things. The main thing was the materials. His spirit spear, pendulum, could be improved and strengthened. It just so happened that the piece of primordial crystal that Mo gave him could also be used. It could be installed in the ring of the pendulum spearhead and used as its wind core. This was the preciousness of the primordial crystal, which could be used with almost any spirit weapon. However, the production process was quite cumbersome. It mainly had to fit with the internal spiritual power transmission track of pendulum and be strong enough. Nanling was barely able to complete it after wasting a large amount of materials. He found that the precision required for this kind of weapon was extremely high. This method of disassembling the complete spirit weapon and selling it was simply a pitfall, because cultivators below the Jindan level could not achieve this kind of weapon precision. Under normal circumstances, he would probably have to pay a high processing fee and let professionals add the spirit core. To be honest, even for Nanling, the material cost now is almost the same as buying a new gun. Nanling was so angry that he vomited blood. He hated the profiteers of this era. When he stopped spending again because of poverty, he suddenly realized a serious problem. He still owed Boss Mo a large sum of money. Oh my goodness, it looks like I can only continue to owe it. Regardless of whether he spent money in vain, the spirit spear pendulum that he had processed himself finally appeared in Nanling's hands, making him love it. Originally, he thought that what he was waiting for next should be the next pioneering journey, or the fantasy journey to the pioneer Holy Land Tianzheng. But what he never expected was that at this moment, the message "the leader is not in the group" lit up. Nanling saw a message from Mo in the group, and suddenly felt a huge sense of helplessness in his heart. "Everyone, I'm afraid our journey can't continue, it's a pity." Nanling was silent, because he immediately guessed why. It was still the prophecy of the digital god. That is something that no one should underestimate. Even if Fanny is brave enough to bear it, what about her family? Li Ji asked, why? Nanling hesitated for a moment and said, has Boss Fanny contacted her family? Mo replied, yes, the master has led the fleet to the vicinity. He just had a big argument with Fanny in the communication, but I know Fanny can't get over the master this time. Li Ji didn't say anything else. She was not good at discussing such family topics. Nanling said to Mo. Then Sister Mo, you should persuade Boss Fanny not to continue to argue with her family. Mo said, in fact, it doesn't matter whether you persuade her or not, because the Shuoxia has accepted a higher level of authority and will not listen to Fanny's instructions for the time being. Nanling shook his head helplessly after hearing this. This is really a powerful father. Mo said again. The Shuoxia will definitely be temporarily disbanded, but you two are different, you are both our trusted friends. So I want to ask one more question, are you willing to leave with us to the ancient domain? Li Ji answered this question almost without thinking. Of course I will go with you. After all, if I stay in Chunyuan 06, I will have to work hard to find a place where I can maintain this prosthetic body. She thought very simply, and even looked at Nanling proudly, meaning, look, Auntie will still be with you. That's right, she didn't think Nanling would give a different answer at all. Based on her understanding of Nanling, this kid will definitely go wherever there is money to be made. What's more, there are two beautiful young ladies on the Zhuoxia. Which male creature would refuse? I still choose to stay. Nanling refused. In the past, he would definitely not refuse, but now he and Fanny have met the Black Death Emperor and heard the mechanical oracle, he admitted that he was afraid. He was worried that he would be trapped in it, which was not a big event that he could afford at the moment. He was serious when he said to Fanny before, wait until you become an immortal before fighting back. When he becomes an immortal, he will not be afraid of the prophecy of the oracle. And if his guess is correct, then he can reduce the risk for both sides by separating from Zhuoxia at this time. Li Ji was very surprised. She didn't expect Nanling to make such a decision at this time. On the contrary, Mo understood it very well. She said, I know, you must want to find out your own life experience, right? Don't worry, I have already told Miss Fenyi about the relevant matters. If you encounter any difficulties in the process of tracing, you can go to Miss Fenyi for help. Nanling blinked. Why did he talk about his own life experience? Then he remembered that he seemed to have said a similar wish when he was talking nonsense once. Unexpectedly, Boss Mo still remembered it in his heart. Li Ji heard this and said, I see. If you want to get information, I'm afraid you need my help. Nanling suddenly said seriously, no, Aunt Li Ji, you should pursue your own goals. I also want to live the life I choose. Li Ji was stunned and sad. She suddenly realized that it was time for her to separate from Nanling. She did not blame Nanling, but felt guilty because she found that she was becoming more and more addicted to the ease and pleasure of being together. This emotion was very dangerous and would make her fragile and unwilling to make progress. She knew that she was different from others. She did not have any outstanding bloodline or talent. If she wanted to follow that path of digital life evolution, she had to maintain her focus and fighting spirit all the way. This was the path she had chosen a long time ago. How could she be shaken by the land of gentleness? She nodded and said, I understand. It's time to say goodbye to you, my little friend. Nanling was also sad, but did not say anything. Mo comforted her, saying, this separation is for the sake of our next reunion. Shonen, when the Zhuoxia sets out on the star journey again, don't refuse our invitation and be sure to come back. Nanling was slightly surprised, then nodded heavily and said, okay, it's a deal. He suddenly smiled and said, I still owe Sister Mo a lot of money, and I'm not the kind of person who defaults on debts. Mo was slightly speechless. Then he said, go and say goodbye to Fanny. She will be very sad if you leave without saying goodbye. Yes, he also had to say goodbye to the eldest lady. They were already good friends. Chapter 109. Starting to work again. Nanling had already left the ship before the Zhuoxia was officially disbanded. He had thought that he would stay on this ship for a long time, but he didn't expect that it was time to say goodbye. Who knows, will there be a chance to meet again? At this moment, Fanny in the hyperspace active group was already speaking loudly. Xiaonan, you should come to us after you have solved your own problems. We're lifelong friends, and you must not forget it. Fanny obviously didn't want to say goodbye so completely. Nanling couldn't help but smile, and tightened his hand on the gift he had just received when he left. He didn't expect that the eldest lady would prepare such a generous gift without saying a word. It's a pity that he was poor and had nothing good to give back to others. He left in a sheep manner without looking back. When he walked out of the airport, he was hit by a strong sense of emptiness. He was alone again, and even felt more lonely than when he was used to being alone. But as to whether he would return to the Zhuoxia in the future, Nanling hadn't decided yet. Because one thing was certain, he had to become stronger. So the question now becomes, how can he continue to survive on this space station? Follow the old path and become a maintenance worker? No, there is no way to make money anymore, and the fixed salary of a maintenance worker cannot afford the high consumption brought by his continuous strengthening. He must find another way out. But what should he do? At this moment, he received a message. He took a look and found that it was sent by Mo. I think these materials should be what you need, so I packed them and sent them to you. Mo left a message. Then came a super large data package. Fortunately, the current transmission speed is good enough, and his intelligence core has enough memory space to eat all these data packages. He opened the data package and was stunned by the documents inside. That was his file. And it was detailed to the day he entered the orphanage and his general life experience after leaving the orphanage. Nanling knew that this was a background check on him by Zhuoxia. But what's the point of showing him this background check now? Then he saw a message in the last paragraph of the data. It was the memory of the director of the welfare home. That day, a woman who was covered in a cloak brought the child to the welfare home. She said that the child's name was Nanling and left without saying a word after putting the child down. However, from the gap in the cloak, it can be seen that she was wearing some kind of military uniform. No, it's not the uniform of the White Feather Corps. Is this the uniform of the Ancient Territory Chilling Corps? Not either, but it is somewhat similar to both sides. Sorry, I can't remember it clearly. Nanling looked at it and remained silent. He found that his problem was too big. It turned out that he had a relationship with both the Ancient Territory and the Wind Territory, and it might also be related to the big figures of both sides. But that relationship was not a good relationship. He felt that the mystery of his life experience had been revealed. However, he didn't know whether such a thing was a good thing. In fact, he felt that Fanny and Mo might have noticed his genetic problems a long time ago, but they just didn't say it. The last document was about an escape spaceship. This small escape ship was discovered a few days after he was sent to the welfare home. When it was discovered, it had been locked by the gravity of Chenyuan 06 and was heading towards Chenyuan 06. Nanling realized at once that this escape ship might be the key to his life experience. Here is a piece of information. The woman in special military uniform took him across the void to board this space station before he arrived at Chenyuan 06, abandoning the escape capsule. In other words, this woman should be very strong, and she doesn't want anyone to know her existence. So this woman, could it be his mother? Nanling speculated curiously. He didn't have much trouble with his parents in this life. And he didn't count as possessing a body, because when he descended into this body, he didn't find any subjective consciousness at all. He felt that he accidentally retained the memory of his previous life when he was reincarnated. But what surprised Nanling was that he had read all these materials, so why were there still a lot of things taking up more memory? He had already stepped off the hovercraft and came to the middle-level apartment he had rented before. It was the same room as last time, and even the furnishings inside had not changed since he left last time. It was conceivable that no one was willing to rent here. Nanling always felt that he was very poor, but that was relative to the huge amount of expenses he had to face, and he still had at least 4 digits of Lingzhu points. At this time, he entered the old room he had just rented, and then clicked on the encrypted information that occupied a large amount of memory. It was really encrypted. What did Mo give him? Then he looked at the massive amount of information in a daze. Because this information was actually what he needed. Wind techniques of various levels, all the way to the Chunfengzhu of the nascent soul stage, and the production methods of various magic tools. They were all very useful information that originally existed in the Zhuoxian information database for him, and now they were all packaged and appeared here. But the problem was that this was not given to him. Instead, it was encrypted in a pre-sale manner. Only if he chose to purchase these materials would the corresponding content be unlocked to him. Well, Boss Mo was indeed a very disciplined person. And she really knew what Nanling lacked, so she prepared everything for him very considerately. However, Nanling was poor now, and he couldn't afford any of the goods here. So after all this time, what he really needed now was money, a new and stable way to make money. At this time, Zhe began to search for suitable jobs in the online community. What surprised him a little was that as his cultivation level broke through to the foundation building stage, some interesting content in the network of Chenyuan 06 was also made public to him. That was a special bounty list. This list was for people with a foundation building cultivation level and a credit level of 80 or above. The content on it was very complicated, with bounties for items, bounties for processing, running errands, and some for hiring tutors or difficult tasks. In short, they were all things that people without certain abilities could not do. What made him a little speechless was that each of these tasks actually had strict restrictions. That is, only those who passed certain assessments in the virtual community could accept limited tasks. Of course, this was a very reasonable thing for the investor. Most of the bounties on this list were good, and Nanling was of course very tempted. Now that you are interested, let's take a look at the assessments in the virtual community. It's been a long time since I felt like working hard to make money. Chapter 110. Start making money again. Nanling was wandering around the virtual community. He had a clear goal, but gradually he suddenly felt relaxed. Speaking of which, he always felt very rushed before, and always felt that there were many things to do, so he was always in a hurry and had no time to stop and look at the surrounding scenery. Now that there is no one around him, he suddenly feels like relaxing. Well, to put it bluntly, he wants to mess around when no one is watching. However, the cruel reality tells Nanling that in this era, without money, he really can't do anything. Because even in the virtual network, he needs to pay for anything he does. Even if he just lies in a virtual scenic spot, it is charged by the hour. This is really shady. Nanling was not in a good mood at the time. With a faint sadness, he still found some places for qualification exams. Taking the qualification exam may be the only thing that doesn't cost money. After all, if you pass these qualification exams, more people will be able to serve those really rich bosses. However, what makes him speechless is that even the qualification exams require qualifications. He originally wanted to start from the simplest and take a certificate in the maintenance profession he is good at. Unexpectedly, in order to take the maintenance jobs in the bounty, one must have a high-level maintenance certificate, and the prerequisite for him to obtain the certificate is to have an intermediate maintenance certificate first. The prerequisite for the intermediate maintenance certificate is not to start from the low-level maintenance certificate, but to pass a series of cultural exams. Persuading Nanling to quit is the most hateful way to persuade him to quit. He cursed and quit the assessment sequence, which was simply disgusting. Then he looked at the qualification for the tutor exam. Oh my god, it was useless to look at it. The cultural level required was high, and it was not suitable for someone like him who had no diploma. For someone like him who had no diploma or special certificate, he looked through it and found that there were only two jobs that were most suitable. One was to be a guard, and the other was to be an errand boy. Guards were not easy either, and those who had experience in the White Feather Corps were preferred. More importantly, they had to have comprehensive reconnaissance and protection capabilities. Nanling could meet these requirements, but he just wanted to decide his own life now. Being a guard could make a lot of money and didn't require any thinking, but there was no freedom. As for running errands, the bounty is slightly less, but it is free. The only requirement is to pass the speed test set up in the virtual network. Registrants are required to submit their own vehicles and complete all the content in the test, and then they can obtain the qualification of licensed racing in Chunyuan 06. Thinking about it this way, this certificate seems quite interesting. As for the significance of this kind of errand task, it is that some companies and bigwigs need to rush letters or small items to a relatively distant place. If the normal logistics system is used, it may delay things. This is why there is this kind of errand task across the entire space station. Nanling is quite interested in this kind of task, so he quickly submitted his Hurricane armor as a vehicle and applied for the assessment. This kind of assessment is quite interesting. At the beginning, it is to test how much pure speed can be achieved. Nanling does not need to make too many adjustments for this, and only needs to exert the driving force of the Hurricane armor itself to complete it. Then it is the ability to balance and respond in a complex environment. The requirement is to carry some fragile items through the road with many obstacles within the specified time. As long as you arrive on time and the goods are intact, you can be considered to have passed the assessment. Nanling had to be more careful about this, because he found that he couldn't show the silky feeling brought to him by the flowing wind talent in this virtual space. So many actions cannot be done too extreme, and margins must be left in advance. Fortunately, it is still not too difficult, but this test can't fully reflect his original strength. After all, the dance of the air is a warwind technique, which is not suitable for traveling. If he really wants to use it, he can actually use the wind escape technique, which is specially used for traveling. The body blends into the wind, disappears in an instant and goes with the wind, appearing in all places where the wind can reach. After several rounds of tests on complex terrain, Nanling suddenly felt that it would be fun to make this test into a game. It's a pity that he finally passed the test with an excellent score. Excellent is not the highest evaluation, because he did not pursue speed in order to seek stability, so he almost just met the requirements. However, he was able to complete each test within the limited time, and he had reached an excellent level. At the same time, he also obtained a speeding license of unknown value. Well, the original name is Inner Space Special Flight License. A very long name. However, after he got the electronic badge granted by this virtual community, Zibby naturally helped him search for relevant information. Then he realized that this certificate is still very versatile. Because Chinyuano 6 is not a small place, the certificate he took here is actually recognized in the wind domain and even many human star domains. And this Inner Space Special Flight Permit is not just for running errands, it is even a driver's license, which allows him to have the qualification to drive vehicles in the inner space in all star domains that recognize this certificate. So what is the inner space? He searched for the definition of this word, and then found that the interior of large starships, the interior of space stations, artificial planets, and the atmosphere of natural planets can all be identified as inner space. This is really an interesting certificate, and Nanling suddenly became interested in other certificates. He felt that he couldn't take the teacher's certificate, so he could try the others, just in case he needed it someday. He really couldn't live without people, and once he left people, he would start to do all kinds of wild and unrestrained things. The abbreviated Inner Flight Certificate has been obtained, and Nanling thought about taking a task to try. The Zibby opened the list in front of him again. He took a look and chose a errand task with only 200 Lingzhu points. There was no other reason for accepting this task, that is, the person who issued the task was right above Nanling's head. The goal of the task was to urgently deliver a box to the airport, which was a factor that was very close in all senses. It seemed that it was urgent, otherwise there would not be such a short distance to run errands. Nanling immediately went out and took the elevator to the 200th floor of this Yunding palace. He knocked on the door according to the house number. But a skeleton frame with a woman's head on it suddenly opened the door. Nanling was stunned for a moment, and then realized that this woman had replaced all the parts except the head with prostheses. And now it looks like a skeleton frame. It should be that this woman is doing some simple maintenance on the prosthesis herself. To be honest, even though he had personally disassembled Aunt Liji's prosthesis, it was still very strange to see this scene at first glance. The woman didn't pay attention to his gaze, and she had already known Nanling's intention through her super brain recognition. She immediately took out a box from behind that door and said, "Please help me deliver this box to my husband immediately. His ship will take off in half an hour." Nanling nodded, took the things and walked outside. He came directly to the outer platform of the 200-story building, and then the backpack on his back unfolded, the Hurricane outer armor was put on his body with a click, and his Hurricane inner armor was never taken off. With a leap, he rushed to the airport. All the surveillance cameras along the way saw him and let him go after identifying his internal flight certificate. To be honest, this feeling of recklessness made Nanling feel that it seemed a bit wasteful to just do errands. Chapter 111 Focus on Business. Nanling handed the box to an introverted man with a business-like smile, and then waved goodbye to him with a smile, completing the first errand task. It was quite simple. It didn't even take 5 minutes on the way, and he also received a 5-star praise from the customer. With a 5-star praise, he can get 20% more of the bounty, which is given from the platform's share. For example, his bounty is 200 Ling Baht points, and the person who posted the task has to pay 40% more of the platform fee, which is 280 Ling Baht points. Now Nanling can get 20% more from the platform, which is 240 Ling Baht points. Although it's not much, it feels like a big profit. Good reviews. This is the meaning of good reviews. Nanling's smile soon became bright, but then the smile froze. Because he saw the 3 beautiful girls looking at him with a distressed look on their faces, as if saying, "How did you end up like this after leaving us?" Nanling stepped back 2 steps, then covered his face and left. He was careless. He didn't expect that before the Juxil left, he actually ran into the 3 guys who were shopping at the airport. Sure enough, those 3 guys must have their own group, right? At this time, the hyperspace active group that had been silent for a long time finally lit up again. Boss Fana coughed and said, "Speaking of which, I can't just leave my cooperation with Fenman Man to her and not care about anything. Shonen, you can be my spokesperson stationed in Fenyu, responsible for my cooperation with Fenman Man." Mo added faintly, "The previous contract has not ended, so there is no need to sign a new contract." What does she mean by this? Is she warning him that he almost breached the contract? Li Ji laughed and said, "Oh, you're so cute when you work hard to make money. So, people should not be too close to each other. If they are too close, they will easily become inhuman." Nanling returned to her apartment angrily, and then said in the group, "Aren't you leaving yet?" Fanny replied, "Let's go soon." Don't you want to buy some local specialties to take back? As for you, don't be too hard on your own. Come to us when things are almost done. The position will always be reserved for you. Nanling seemed to see a bowl of fragrant soft rice stuffed in front of her, and shook her head helplessly and said, "I know, thank you." After that, the call ended. To be honest, I was very moved, and I really couldn't bear to refuse. I wanted to just muddle through, but now I feel that I have to seriously investigate my life experience. Although I don't care, I can't disappoint my friend's expectations, right? Leaving Zhuoxia is actually his rather selfish idea. He hopes to mislead the people and forces under the Oracle, so that they will think that Fanny will not be a threat if she chooses to compromise and return to the ancient domain, and not pay attention to him, a small figure. If his guess is correct, the prophecy obtained from the Oracle will change again after Fanny returns to the ancient domain, right? At worst, he could find them later and disperse to confuse them. But now he should solve the problem of his background first. Nanling began to plan his actions seriously. First of all, there was no need to explore the welfare house again. After all, the information that could be obtained in the welfare house had been almost checked, and he should not have found anything in the past. He could revisit the old place and see the environment where he grew up as a child, and see if there were any changes in the people and things that were familiar to him. Because there was a high possibility that the missing female soldier would protect him in secret. If that was the case, some clues might be found. Another very important clue was the escape spaceship mentioned in the information. It was also necessary to find out where this spaceship was now, and this might require the help of Miss Fenyi's power on Chunyuan 06. Nanling sighed and thought that what he should do now was to use the errand task to find out all the terrains of Chunyuan 06, and then consider what to do in the next stage. It seemed that he had gone around in a circle and returned to the starting point, but in fact, he knew that his identity might be a bit sensitive, so he didn't dare to do anything out of the ordinary, and tried to complete the task imperceptibly. He spent this night in meditation and cultivation. Even though the smart core can cultivate automatically throughout the process, he still prefers to operate the process by himself. He even deliberately turned off the smart core when practicing. Even though the smart core does not have the function of shutting down by itself, he found that as long as he cuts off the energy supply from the spirit furnace to the smart core, it can enter the energy-saving standby state by itself. This is the experience gained from repeated tug-of-war with the smart core, which is completely useless for ordinary people. In this way, he can't even use the help of the spirit furnace when practicing independently, and can only feel the surrounding spiritual energy little by little and try to absorb and refine it. To be honest, every time he practices independently, it is also that time when his cultivation efficiency is the lowest. But he will not give up such independent cultivation. Perhaps it is an old concept. He just feels that he must experience the process of cultivation more by himself. If he had known that he would travel to such a sci-fi cultivation world, he should have studied more books on cultivation in his previous life. Now he only knows that cultivation requires abstention from sex, and everything else can only be done according to this era. Overnight, he received several farewell messages. They are all gone. Nanling sighed and replied to each of them to say goodbye. The ancient domain is about 3 months away from here. Communication is not possible in hyperspace, and you will not be harassed in this regard for a long time. He responded casually, and then the smart core loaded the bounty list again. There were a lot of updates in the bounty list. This time he did not deliberately choose a task, but just picked one at random. This time the task was ordinary, just a middle-class family with a small fortune suddenly wanted to eat the special dishes at the other end of the space station, so they ordered an errand. Because the distance was far and that time was required, the errand fee reached 300 Lingzhu points. Nanling changed into his own equipment, first ran to the store in 3 minutes, and then appeared at the other end of the space station 10 minutes later, floating in the air and gently knocking on the window with the family's apartment on more than 300 floors. "I wish you a pleasant meal." He gave a warm blessing from the service industry, which made him look more professional. Then he undoubtedly received another 5-star review. Counting the 20% platform income brought by the review, that is 360 Lingzhu points. And he didn't even take 15 minutes to change his clothes. Looking at it this way, 24 Lingzhu points per minute, it seems that this is a very efficient way to make money. If he works harder and works 8 hours a day, wouldn't he have 5,760 Lingzhu points in his account every day? This income is very high. Nanling immediately became excited and decided to make up his mind to monopolize these tasks. Speaking of which, he found that the number of people willing to take on such expedited tasks is quite small, so the number of such tasks on the bounty list is obviously in a state of oversupply. And tasks that no one claims will be cancelled within a period of time, obviously, many people don't think this is a decent job. But if you do it seriously, you can really make money. Well, Nanling thinks it is quite efficient. The main reason was that, by running around the station, he could legitimately investigate the various important buildings on the station. He could also gather information for his next mission to investigate his own life experience. He could also design an escape route in case it was needed. It was a rainy day. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 112. Revisiting the old place. After working diligently for a month, Nanling's hurricane armor is now completely different from the original feeling. He is a person who can do one thing and specialize in one thing. At this time, the hurricane armor has been replaced with a brand new white paint, and then the softer paint makes it look very gentle as a combat armor. This is obviously a special paint to increase the praise rate, full of service awareness. So much so that he has additional requirements for the appearance of his next combat armor, which he originally didn't care about. As for the harvest this month, it is still very considerable. It is not as much as he imagined at the beginning, but the total income is 70,000. This errand job is too profitable. Of course, the main reason is that Thu would do this job normally with his ability. Let's take a look at his quality first. This month he once again filled a layer of the wind spirit formation in his body, and now he has officially entered the third level of foundation building. And the wind control technique LV9, this is something that many children of big families can't do, and it can definitely be considered a high-end talent anywhere. It's just that everyone here knows that he is from Zhuoxioa now, and those high-end departments that could have recruited him don't dare to really get involved with him. This has led to him, who should have entered a higher-level job, becoming a freelancer, and then causing a business monopoly in a low-end service industry, but after a month of busy work, it's time to get down to business. He plans to find an opportunity to go to the lower area first. Of course, it would be better if he could take a task. After all, he doesn't know if someone is always watching him, so it's better to be safe. It's just that the gap between the lower and middle areas is bigger than he thought. At least in the past month, he hasn't seen any tasks involving these two areas. Or the tasks in the lower area will not appear on this list at all. Nanling hesitated for a while, and finally decided to do it himself. Thanks to Boss Mo's selfless sharing, he has figured out all the surveillance locations and equipment styles around during this time. He knows very well that the equipment here is within his invisible range. Then after running errands every day, he returned from the floor-to-ceiling window of the apartment as usual. The wind technique blew away the foul air around, and then the outer window opened, and he walked in again. But for some reason, when the outer window was closed, a small stone happened to be stuck on the window edge, so that the outer window was not closed tightly. Originally, there should be an alarm. It's just a pity that no one has rented this place for a long time, and even if there is a malfunction in the equipment, no one comes to repair it. The staff of the rental company, as the landlord, is too lazy to come to work to deal with such a small malfunction with a fluke mentality. This is a little secret that Nanling discovered when he rented this place last time, and now it has become a key point that he can use. Such a small gap seems to have nothing to do, just a little airflow will rush in. But after Nanling closed the curtains, he let out a long breath, turned his back to the curtains and silently put on the face shield of the Hurricane inner armor. Behind the Hurricane inner armor is a close-fitting backpack, which is the place for the outer armor. This backpack looks thin and does not take up space, but the advanced space folding technology can fit the entire set of outer armor well. Then Nanling put on a big cloak and put on a hood. Camouflage was projected on the visor under the hood, making him look like a faceless man from the outside. After all this was prepared, he disappeared. There was a small airflow in the room silently. A weak airflow rushed out from the gap of the French window that could not be closed, and the next moment his figure appeared in the alley outside the window wrapped in a layer of grey airflow. This layer of grey airflow was very familiar. It was the same material formed by the inert proton flow as the Zhuoxia. This was the gift that Fana gave to Nanling when they parted, as a thank you for his help to her all the time, and for his hard work for her. She directly gave Nanling a functional spiritual tool with its own system. It was made of the off fragments used to make the ghost disc, which was actually equivalent to a smaller version of the energy-absorbing shield. At this time, this spiritual tool was like a great jade ring hanging on Nanling's waist, and its name was Ghost Ring. In addition, Nanling can now avoid all optical detection refraction, so his invisibility can be achieved to a very perfect level. He took 2 steps forward, and then he disappeared quietly again, blending into the wind completely, and came to the entrance of a damaged maintenance passage. Then he showed up in this interlake full of energy radiation, and once again it became a place that no one cared about. This was his world, and no one was more familiar with the environment in this interlake than him. He even knew where there was a crack that ran through the lower area. So the next moment, he turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared on the spot, and went directly through the crack to the sky of the lower area. This was his first time walking this road, and when he was familiar with it next time, he could walk through it in one breath. The lower area was a world full of darkness. The sky here was completely different from the simulated sky of the middle and upper areas, and there was only a thick layer of exhaust gas, like a thick fog that never dissipated all year round. The whole space was extremely dark, and the only light source on the ground was various vulgar neon lights, and there were dark corners everywhere. And often in a corner, there would probably be a rotting corpse lying. This corpse was probably incomplete, because the person who made it just wanted to take away its original prosthesis. Nanling was used to this, and this place was full of familiar smells. He quietly landed on the ground, and did not hide his figure anymore, but just walked in this dark, damp and germ-filled street with a cloak. From time to time, some women wearing revealing clothes or nothing at all appeared on the roadside, wearing heavy makeup and opening the door to welcome guests. They looked very enthusiastic, but through their eyes, Nanling saw numbsouls. After all, there are very few people who can wake up in time like Li Ji. He wandered around and staggered to the area he was once familiar with. To be honest, it was actually very dangerous to wander around like this, but he was too familiar with what would happen here, and always avoided appearing in the sight of some dangerous people for the second time. In this way, he had no danger along the way. But after walking around for several times, he helplessly found that there was really nothing to see here. Because the people he was familiar with were gone, the places where he used to work had all changed, and there was no one he was familiar with. Things had changed, and people had changed. That was it. Chapter 113 Abnormalities in the lower area. Nanling returned disappointed this time. It had only been a short time since he left, and all traces of existence had already disappeared. However, he did not suspect anything and just left quietly. Seeing that it was still early, he wanted to go to the welfare house to take a look. Of course, he would not go inside the welfare house, but just wanted to see if there were any clues nearby. Everything was still normal. This welfare house could be said to be the most peaceful place in the entire lower level area. It was just a pity that the children here had to leave at the latest when they were 14 years old, and whether they lived or died in the future depended on fate. Speaking of which, the people in the lower level area were bastards, but they actually knew that the welfare house could not be touched. He was suddenly stunned. No, how could the scum in the lower level area have such awareness? Although the operation of the welfare house was funded by the official funds of Chenyuan 06, wasn't it just a target for the scum in the lower level area to take advantage of? Or they would not come openly, but who could do anything to them if they stole things? But why did the welfare house never have any operational problems? Nanling thought of something, and then turned and left. He came to a dark corner and looked around a pile of rotten things with flies flying around. After making sure that there was no sight and no surveillance in this corner, he quietly disappeared from the spot, entering a completely invisible state. In this state, he quickly checked around. Then he found what he expected to see but should not be here, a set of complete and running monitoring equipment. If he had not accepted Mo's teaching in this regard, he really couldn't find the secret monitoring. This set of monitoring system covers the entire welfare home. If you look closely, I'm afraid that all changes in and around the welfare home cannot escape monitoring. And the arrangement method is very professional, and you can tell at a glance that it is not something that people in the lower district can do. Nanling quietly withdrew from this area. There was no need to continue exploring. He had already gained the most. But if Boss Mo was here, she would definitely be able to directly follow that clue through these monitoring equipment and find that person who arranged all this behind the scenes. And now he can only quietly retrieve to ensure that he will not alert the enemy. Then, according to his own memories, he carefully checked along the route he took after leaving the welfare home that year. An unfortunate reality is that he found traces of surveillance along the way. This sign existed in the area where he settled down and lived for a long time after leaving the welfare home. In other words, he may have spent his entire life under the surveillance of others, and he only discovered it now. Nanling didn't mind it at all, he just felt happy that he finally found a clue. However, just when he was about to return, he expanded the scope to check more for safety reasons, and found the seriousness of the problem. In all the places he had been to, he found surveillance equipment in some hidden corners. This was really an amazing discovery. Even the surveillance in the middle area was not so complete. Who was monitoring the entire lower area? Nanling first denied the official of Chunyuan 06, because if a certain operating company of Chunyuan 06 wanted to install surveillance, there must be a task for the maintenance department. And Nanling had never seen anything like it, and there was no task for the lower area at all. This discovery suddenly made him feel unfamiliar with the lower area that he was once familiar with. He found that there was indeed a real manipulator behind the chaos in the lower area. It was just that the existence was hidden behind that chaos, making it impossible for people to discover its existence. And one thing is certain, that existence originally installed these surveillances to observe him, because this part of the surveillance is obviously older. The rest are newer. It can be guessed that the other party first conducted surveillance on him, and then took the opportunity to monitor the entire lower area. While Nanling was hesitating, a communication group that had been silent for a long time suddenly became active. He took a casual look and saw that it was the information in the hyperspace active group. The information in it was flooding the screen. Of course, the content was mostly about the eldest lady playing games with her sisters. But in the end, he deliberately outed him. "Xiaonan, we are taking a break from the hyperspace trip. How have you been this month?" Nanling responded, "Not bad, but can't the hyperspace trip last for 3 months? Why did it only take 1 month?" Fanna said with some sarcasm, "It's because the old man wanted to save face and rushed here to catch me back, but the fleet was on the road again without any rest. Now they have found another port to temporarily rest and replenish supplies." Nanling understood. Mo asked with concern, "How is your background investigation going?" Nanling hesitated for a moment. It seemed that there was really no need to hide it from his friends who had already gone far away. In fact, they could only listen to what happened here as anecdotes. So he said, "You'll never think of what I found." As he said that, he briefly described the situation he found in the lower area. However, just after he finished speaking, Li Ji suddenly reminded him, "You are careless. Since this lower area is monitored layer by layer, you should not stay in the lower area to chat with us. This frequent interaction of remote information will make you a huge beacon." Nanling was stunned when he heard it, and then disappeared without saying a word. He directly came to the air with wind escape, and under the perspective of looking down, he really found that some people were moving towards his original position from all directions. He did not speak again, and directly silenced his communication, and then used wind escape to pass through the gap in the mezzanine and came to the middle area. Then he did not stop, and came to the central golden axis of the space station, which is the headquarters of Fenyuan Operation Company. He resumed communication at the maintenance elevator. When he communicated with the outside world here, the information flow could be mixed with the massive intersection information in the golden axis, which was not easy to be discovered. After the communication was restored, he said, "Okay, it should be safe now." His re-speaking also made the 3 girls breathe a sigh of relief. Mo still reminded, "You'd better change your place of stay. If you have any difficulties, you can find Miss Fenyi. She will provide you with some help." Nanling listened and said indifferently, "It's not a big problem. In fact, it is thanks to the gift given to me by Boss Fanna. It has made me truly invisible. To put it another way, even if my identity is really exposed, I can completely abandon all my identities and exist in Chunyuan 06 as a ghost. That might be more convenient." Fanny was very proud when she heard it, but she still said modestly, "Don't be too careless. This kind of invisibility is not so resistant to the soul. It would be bad if someone captures you with divine thoughts." Nanling was chatting with his little sisters, but he didn't expect that even though they were hundreds of light years apart, Boss Fanna's unlucky attribute still shrouded him. No, maybe it shrouded the entire space station. Chapter 114. Lady Antarctica. After finishing the chat, Nanling returned to his residence. Although Mo had suggested that he change his residence, he did not think it was so urgent. After all, he had encountered some trouble in the lower area and this was the middle area. He returned to his room, used wind magic to blow away some of the odor that had penetrated into the room, and then sat cross-legged to continue practicing. To be honest, he was indeed ready to change a place to practice. He practiced to win spiritual power, and practicing in a higher place should be more effective. However, even in this situation, just 4 hours later before dawn, he suddenly felt something was wrong. During the practice, he blocked the function of the intelligence core, but he could hear a low footstep coming from outside. It was a deliberately suppressed footstep, and even if he was careful, he could not completely cover it up. It sounded like a heavy body. After hearing this, Nanling immediately stopped practicing and stood up, and then quickly put on the hurricane inner armor and carried the outer armor on his back. Then his other luggage was already packed in a gift box. After lifting the box with one hand, he quietly went out. He came to the internal elevator of the Yunting Tianju and prepared to take the elevator up. At the moment when the elevator door closed, he heard a beep at the door of the apartment building, which was the sound of the door opening. Nanling stood in the elevator, looking expressionlessly at the sturdy man who entered from the main door of the apartment, and the bad feeling in his heart was already bursting. He was exposed. Although he didn't know what he had to expose, and didn't know whether those people came to him out of kindness or malice. But since the other party chose to sneak into his residence at night, Nanling assumed that the other party had more malice. The sturdy man watched the elevator door close, and then walked into another elevator unhurriedly. The 2 elevators went up one after another. Nanling's elevator stopped in the middle of Yunting Tianju, where there was a large platform. The sturdy man's elevator also stopped, as if he had known that Nanling would stop here. But when he walked out of the elevator, he turned his head and saw an empty elevator car. And it was clear that there was nothing on this platform. It was quiet except for the strong convection between the tall buildings and the whistling of the wind. The strong man was stunned, then lowered his head and said to himself, "I lost him." However, he soon received information from somewhere, and then suddenly turned sideways in shock. He saw Nanling standing there and looking at him calmly. Nanling saw that he had reacted, so he nodded and said, "It seems that you have a very powerful backup. You can actually hack into the surveillance equipment of this place and use the surveillance here to find me." The strong man looked over. He was about 2 meters tall with a square face. He wore a pair of sunglasses so that people could not see his specific expression, but under the sunglasses, there was a scar on his cheek that could not be hidden. He looked at Nanling and asked, "Did you reveal your flaws on purpose?" Nanling nodded, "We have to confirm your abilities. Now it looks pretty good. So, why did you ask me to come?" The sturdy man said calmly, "Someone wants to see you." Nanling was not surprised by this. He just asked back, "How did you find me?" The sturdy man hesitated for a moment, then said, "We have been keeping an eye on you until we found that you had exposed your tracks in the lower area. We were afraid that you would completely hide from our sight, so we had to contact you in advance." Nanling was speechless when he heard this. It turned out that he had never been able to leave their sight. No, he should have been out of their sight when he was on the Zhuoxia, which means that every time he set foot on Qinyuan 06, he would fall into their sight again. It seems that they have infiltrated Qinyuan 06 very well. Nanling did not speak. The sturdy man suddenly turned around and walked back to the elevator without saying a word. At the same time, he said, "I have already told you about the invitation. If you have figured it out, you know how to attract our attention." Nanling watched him leave, but he didn't expect that he would be the one to act the other way in the end. As for who wanted to see him, Nanling knew it. But why? Nanling pondered for a moment, first used the intelligence core to find the next rental location, and moved in after quickly completing the process. He didn't go far, and rented a high-rise apartment in Yunting Palace. It's not that he didn't want to stay away from trouble, but since the other party could easily find where he lived, it actually made no sense for him to rent anywhere. He was too lazy to walk anymore, so he decided to stay here. At dawn, he was about to find a running errand task to relax, but as soon as he opened the bounty list, a running errand bounty appeared first. This was a task to deliver salt to a corner of the middle-level area, which felt a bit child's play. Nanling's eyebrows jumped, and he took it, and then directly ordered a bag of salt online to be delivered there. Just as he was rushing there, the salt he bought for 0.1 Lingzhu points was also delivered by the drone. That's right, he earned 200 yuan for running errands. But in fact, there are warehouses in many places in the space station for such basic living supplies, and drones can be used to deliver them to any place within 10 minutes. How to say it, this mission is obviously a trap specially prepared for him. He was hanging outside the window of this apartment and knocked on the window gently. When the curtains were opened, revealing an elegant woman with long wine-red hair and a black dress, he said politely, "Madam, your salt." There was no embarrassment at all. This was his professional quality. He made money by his own service and skills, not shabby. The lazy woman with long wine red hair smiled and said, "Thank you, I'm very happy." Then she opened the French window and said, "Come in and sit for a while, my child." Nanling's face changed, and then he put the hurricane armor into the folding backpack behind him. Then he bowed slightly and walked into the apartment. The woman was supposed to be at least middle-aged, but her temperament was outstanding, and she didn't look old at all. In fact, she didn't look old, only mature and elegant. She invited Nanling to sit down, and then brought a cup of tea, and then said, "I didn't want to see you so early, but you are so smart that you have found the clues. Last night I wanted Talon to invite you back directly, but I didn't expect that fool to be so proud and didn't complete the task. So I couldn't help but come to see you." Nanling hesitated for a moment, and finally asked, "What should I call you?" The woman said with a gentle elegance, "They all call me Mrs. Nanji, and you, I watched you grow little by little in the petri dish." It seemed gentle, but it was actually full of cold meaning. Nanling shook his body and asked, "Am I your experimental subject?" Mrs. Nanji shook her head gently and said, "Who knows, I just roughly remember what you looked like at the time." As she spoke, she looked at Nanling's expression very seriously, and seemed to be very interested in his reaction. Chapter 115 Listening Organization. It felt a bit strange. Lady Nanji's description was a bit vague. It seemed that she was not very clear about that memory. But when Lady Nanji told Nanling the cruel truth, Nanling didn't feel that it was too painful. After all, he had an interesting soul. He even joked to himself, "What is the name of the assembly line that made me?" Lady Nanji glanced at him and said, "One day, I will go back there to find out the truth. If you don't want to go with me, then there is no need to know this. And if you are willing to go with me, then I will tell you everything I know on the way." Nanling closed his eyes, and he seemed to see a picture. The young Lady Nanji should be a researcher or a technical officer. She was responsible for taking care of a laboratory that made modulators. Then when a crisis broke out, she hurriedly hugged him and boarded the escape ship together, and then fled all the way here. As for why he was left in the welfare home, Nanling didn't want to ask at all. After all, he and this Lady Nanji were not related, and he was grateful to her for saving him. It was only natural that she did not want to bring him along as a burden. So he asked, "Lady Nanji, why are you so concerned about my growth?" Lady Nanji sighed, "You are the last witness of my career in the first half of my life, and it is not easy to give up. Besides, although I have a lot of things to do, please don't doubt my feelings for you. I like you very much." Although there was such a straightforward declaration of love in it, Nanling always felt that there was something uncertain here, but Lady Nanji obviously did not want to talk to him more. He didn't want to talk more about this issue, so he just asked calmly, "Then madam, is there something you want me to do?" Madam Nanji looked at him tenderly and said, "There is one thing, which is that we hope you can join our organization." Nanling immediately apologized after hearing this, "Sorry, I have an organization." Madam Nanji nodded and said, "I know that you and the eldest lady of the Gi family are close friends, but she can be considered your close relative in terms of bloodline, and you two are not suitable to be together." Nanling was embarrassed at the time, and he said, "I haven't thought about it that way." Madam Nanji said, "I'm just reminding you to prevent any trouble. And the organization I'm joining now is also very loose, and it doesn't require you to quit your original identity before you can join. On the contrary, you can also obtain a lot of valuable information through this organization and help them in return." Nanling felt very strange after hearing this. This kind of organization then he realized, is this an intelligence organization? Madam Nanji nodded and said, "Dai Ting is our name. You can become our peripheral personnel and can choose whether to accept intelligence missions. The most important thing is that you can use Dai Ting's channels to buy intelligence from us." Nanling nodded to show that he knew. He knew in his heart that this was Lady Nanji's way of trying to get close to him or influence his behavior. Ever since he was sure that he was a man-made man hatched in a laboratory, he was very worried about one thing. Did Lady Nanji, who participated in his creation, have any means to control him? He didn't dare to gamble, so his silence at this time was more about thinking about his own danger and the way he would get along with Lady Nanji. First of all, one thing is certain, that is, Lady Nanji has no hostility towards him, at least for now. In addition, she obviously has a high status in the mysterious intelligence organization Dai Ting. Nanling suspected that she might have been a member of Dai Ting for a long time, and was definitely not developed after coming to Chenyuan 06. In fact, the Dai Ting organization of Chenyuan 06 is simply her downline. So how should he respond to her invitation? How about it? How have you considered it? Lady Nanji looked at Nanling with a smile, as if waiting for him to make a decision, but she simply wanted to see him thinking and struggling. Nanling's eyes were fixed, and he said, "Okay, I promise you." He had made a decision. Escape was not the solution to this kind of problem, he had to face it. But Mrs. Nanji smiled and said, "Decisiveness and courage are both good qualities, but even if you choose to stay away from trouble, it is a wise move that reflects your wisdom." She didn't seem to care about what decision Nanling made, but just admired the way he made the decision. Nanling shook his head and didn't respond. He said, "The deal has been settled, can I leave now?" He was actually a little flustered in his heart. He was afraid that if he stayed here any longer, Mrs. Nanji would see through everything about him. Madame Nanji said, "Don't worry. Since you have joined the outer listening team, here is a mission. I wonder if you are willing to take it." Nanling asked, "What is it?" Madame Nanji said, "The branch of the Fen group in Chunyuan 06 suddenly built an experimental base in the lower area a month ago. Some annoying noises can be heard from the base from time to time, so I would like to ask you to help me find out what is there. Of course, if you can find out what it is, I will quote you according to the value of the information, with a minimum of 10,000 Lingzhu points. Is intelligence so easy to learn?" Nanling was shocked. And this kind of thing is not difficult for him, because he is confident that he can sneak in quietly with his ability. So he hesitated. Madame Nanji is obviously a person who understands the eyes. When she saw Nanling hesitate, she immediately passed a set of information to his intelligence core. She said, "This is the data obtained by my people during the outer reconnaissance. I hope it will be helpful to you." Nanling felt like he was being pushed. He found that he seemed to have accepted this mission inexplicably, but he didn't feel disgusted. Nanling sighed and received the information package. He was indeed ready to accept the task, because this task was completely within his ability and the offer was also very high. However, when his intelligence core quickly analyzed the information, it paused at a sound frequency. He was very familiar with this sound frequency. So he raised his head in confusion and looked at Madame Nanji and said, "What if I can tell you the answer now?" Madame Nanji pouted slightly in surprise, then gently covered her mouth and said, "Do you really know?" "Still the same, I will buy it from you based on the value of the information." "Of course, that is based on your willingness to trade." Nanling also pondered this question after listening, but he soon confirmed that it didn't matter if this kind of information was sold. After all, is there anyone he cares about in Chunyuan 06? And Fana herself would not care about this. Moreover, he felt that with his ability to listen carefully, it would be a matter of time before he could find out the news. It would be better for him to get a considerable commission and save Madame Nanji from wasting time and manpower on this. So he nodded and said, "That's the king insect." Mrs. Nanji was really surprised this time. She frowned and asked, "The king insect of the nether locust?" Nanling said, "It should be a degenerated king insect." Mrs. Nanji was very excited when she heard this. She said, "That's also very valuable. Do you know where it came from?" Nanling shook his head and said, "Sorry, I can't tell you that. Boss Fanny, please be moved. She is keeping her chastity for you." Chapter 116. A deal. "Sorry, I can't tell you that." Nanling responded calmly. Madame Nanji was not surprised to hear that. She just nodded and said, "Indeed, this secret is kept by the daughter of the Gyu family, and she has the qualifications. Can you give me more information? The more detailed it is, the higher the price I will offer." Nanling didn't waste any more words and directly sent all the biological characteristics of the two-headed worms and the genetic map of the king worm that he had collected. This data was very complete, and Madame Nanji was dazed for a moment. There was even a sound spectrum of the king worm and the two-headed worm in it, which could be completely overlapped with the sound heard outside the experimental base in the lower area, which was a direct evidence. However, this was so accurate that even a genetic sequence of the king worm could be given, so another question was confirmed. This king worm was caught by Nanling and his team. At the same time, Madame Nanji also came to her senses. Nanling threw so much valuable information to her so straightforwardly, as if he was trying to turn the tables on her. Just like she liked to throw choices to Nanling, watching how he made decisions and making psychological profiles. This time, Nanling did the opposite and used the same method to deal with her. Madame Nanji laughed unexpectedly, and still asked gently, "Aren't you afraid that I will ignore you after taking these important information?" Nanling answered without any concern. Being able to exchange this information for money is a pleasant surprise. They themselves are not of much value to me. Madame Nanji nodded and said, but you can use it to see the quality of the dieting organization, and you can also test whether I am sincere to you, right? Then I can't let you succeed. This information is extremely valuable. According to the internal information classification of dieting, although this is not the most timely intelligence, it is accurate and detailed and not too late. So I can buy it from you for 500,000 Lingzhu points. Do you think it's appropriate? Nanling listened without any hesitation. Okay. No matter whether the price is too much or too little, he will take whatever Madame Nanji gives. The next moment, the money and goods were exchanged, and Nanling finally became rich again. However, even so, he was not very happy. The next set of pure white faith combat armor he had his eyes on was even more expensive. The full set of blueprints alone cost 200,000, and the material cost was unknown. He could only save money bit by bit. After all, the Hurricane armor was only a better standard model, while the pure white faith was a semi-private order model with huge modification space, which was considered a combat armor that had one foot in the upper ranks. Even if such a high-end combat weapon was made by himself, the material cost would definitely be very high, and Nanling just happened to lose the best platform. This was really a frustrating situation. He could only decide to exchange the blueprints first to get familiar with it. It seemed that he would still have to rely on the Hurricane armor to fight for a long time. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you, then I'll leave first. Nanling decided to say goodbye. He still had many questions in his mind, but he held them back. Because he knew that even if those questions were answered now, it would not be of any substantial benefit to him, so it would be better to think about how to improve his strength. Madame Nanji opened her mouth as if she wanted to call him, but then she held back. When Nanling disappeared, the strong man named Tai Long pushed the door open and walked out of the room next to her. He stood beside Madame Nanji and said, "Madam, are you just going to let him go? You always say that he is the most important key." Madame Nanji shook her head and said, "That's true, but he is now very wary of us. Forcing him to stay will not end well. It's better to let him go first, and then he will know what to do when the time comes." Tai Long said in a deep voice, "I'm not used to relying on one person's consciousness for such an important matter." Madame Nanji said, "I know this child, even better than he knows himself. I watched him grow up, and I know that he always retains a sincerity and kindness in his heart. In the face of major issues, he is always trustworthy." Madame Nanji said in a deep and warm voice, and then said, "Compared to this, in addition to you, me and the child who must go, I need to find another person." Tai Long immediately said solemnly, "I will go and look for him now." After that, he lowered his head and retreated. Madame Nanji stood up, sighed, and took away the teacup she had prepared for Nanling. The water in the cup had already gone cold, and had not been touched at all. Madame Nanji took the cold water and slowly drank it from her lips, which were still as warm as a girl's. Then, a trace of heart-wrenching loneliness appeared on her face. Nanling hurried back to his residence. He was hesitating whether to start long-distance communication with Zhuoxia. Then he suddenly realized one thing, that is, the people of Dieting already knew his identity, and even if the people in the space station knew that he was conducting long-distance communication, what would it matter? He was the representative of Zhuoxia stationed here, and he could even apply for a long-distance encrypted channel with confidence. Thinking of this, he completely let go, and simply opened the communication again, and then mixed into the hyperspace active group and shouted, "Does anyone know what the Dieting organization is?" The friends who were already in the distance immediately heard his call and began to speak enthusiastically. "Fanny, I seem to have heard of it." "What was it?" "Mo. Fanny, you're absent from class again during Teacher's Thong's class. The teacher introduced us to those unique hidden forces in the many galaxies in class. The Dieting organization is one of them. They like to pry into all kinds of secrets and do intelligence business. But what's interesting is that their peripheral members are okay, but the core members seem to have a strong cohesion and have their own unique set of values." Li Ji asked with concern, "Why did they find you?" Nanling said, "Well, they found the data flow when we were communicating, and then located me based on it. But don't worry, they just invited me to become a peripheral member of this Dieting, and they also bought the information about the king insect from me." He spoke frankly about this matter, because he knew that the two bosses would not care about what he did, but would like his honesty more. Sure enough, Fanny didn't mind that he sold the information about the king bug, but reminded him, "It seems that this Dieting organization is going to do something big in Chenyuan 06. Please help me take care of Fenman Man and don't let her be sold to a brothel." Mo said. I think Rhiannon should find a chance to hide with Miss Fengi, and then wait with Miss Fengi until the turmoil in the space station is over before making other plans. Li Ji also gave suggestions, but she hoped that Nanling could be wary of the dieting organization. Sure enough, people from the lower class are more wary of this kind of force that can actually monitor the entire lower area. Everyone chatted for a while, and the communication had to be interrupted. Because the Shuoxia is about to enter the hyperspace flight state again, this regular communication cannot be carried out. After Nanling ended the communication, he felt much more relaxed. Chatting with these traveling friends can really relieve the pressure on him. Chapter 117 The one who came to cause trouble. Nanling just sold intelligence and got 500,000. Although he immediately spent 200,000 to exchange for cutting-edge blueprints and materials, he could still do a lot of things with the remaining money. For example, he bought wind skills and spiritual weapon formulas. He even started to study new three-piece models, because as his cultivation level improved, he gradually felt that the original wind-weaving suit had been completely mastered by him, and he needed a new challenge. However, he was used to the various preferential prices brought by good platforms, and the prices of various high-level three-piece sets in the space station community store made him shout that he could not accept it. Because according to the higher-level Green Jade series that he currently liked, the price of that three-piece set directly came to just over 400,000, which was about twice as expensive as the price of the wind-weaving suit. But in Nanling's opinion, the performance of this Green Jade suit was only 37% higher than that of the wind-weaving suit. Well, it was still a lot. Nanling felt very poor again. No wonder it was so difficult to upgrade his class. After he entered this door, he realized that he was really just hovering on the threshold. Nanling had to be thankful that there was no such thing as alchemy in this era. After all, it was too difficult to summarize the spiritual materials suitable for alchemy in the interstellar environment. Moreover, the practice of this era was to find clues from the pile of old papers and then restore them with scientific means. It was already amazing to be able to restore the spiritual array and spiritual tools to a certain extent by combining technology. He simply didn't think about these things for the time being, and instead exchanged for an auxiliary wind technique that seemed very interesting to him, and then studied it. This wind technique is called warm wind technique, which is a typical wind technique created under the scientific thinking of this era. Its principle is to extract the oxygen components in the air, and then directly ionize these oxygen, and wrap the whole body of the recipient in the form of wind technique, so that the recipient's blood oxygen concentration can be quickly increased in a short time. This spell can be used for auxiliary treatment and temporary recovery of physical strength. If the treatment potion can also be dissolved in the warm wind and used together with the cell proliferation instrument, the maximum effect of battlefield treatment can be achieved. It can also be used to prolong life at critical moments. Even if the heart stops beating and breathing stops, it doesn't matter. The warm wind technique can maintain the blood oxygen concentration in the recipient's body and maintain the body metabolism for a long time. It can be said to be a strong breath. It can even work in harsh environments, especially when there is no additional life-sustaining oxygen production system. It is absolutely a life-saving skill. Of course, according to Nanling's understanding, this spell can also assist others in attacking in the atmosphere. Because the purified oxygen is combined with the fire spell, normal people know what kind of effect this is. This is also why Nanling values this spell. There are many occasions where it is applicable, and they are all very important. This auxiliary spell has become his main research direction. This spell looks simple, but in fact it has extremely high requirements for control, and even the requirements for spiritual power vaguely exceed the LV8 wind control technique provided by the Zivng Intelligence Core. Nanling was able to learn it entirely by his own ability, which he could not do at the Intelligence Core. But if he changed to the king who set he liked, then he could do it. This is the disgusting thing about the Wind Consortium. They are all LV8 wind control techniques, but they use the learning threshold of subsequent wind techniques to secretly divide them. This means that if ordinary practitioners want to use more advanced wind techniques, they must consider constantly iterating their three-piece sets, or at least replacing their intelligence cores. Nanling sneered at this. He didn't need it. If he wanted, he could use the wind-weaving set until the end of time. His stinginess completely broke out at this time. He originally wanted to buy that jade set at the right time, but after he knew the nature of these dog merchants, he decided not to let them succeed. Anyway, he can use the wind-weaving set now, and he can even use it until the golden core stage. As for the nascent soul stage, isn't it too early? I don't know why, after he learned the warm wind technique, he felt that he had made a lot of money. The Wind Consortium lost a lot of money on him. Another month passed like this. During this period, he was completely focused on his own affairs, as if the previous conversation with Mrs. Nanji had never taken place. However, at this time, he was brushing orders and running errands as usual. Suddenly, his eyes jumped, and he saw another errand task that suddenly appeared when he opened the list. He was very familiar with this kind of thing, and it was a task specially prepared for him. He was asked to go to a certain place to pick up something, and then cross a long distance to deliver it to almost the other side of the space station. This kind of thing was obviously the style of Lady Nanji, so he could choose to just ignore it or choose to participate. Nanling thought about it, and the only clue to his life story was here with Lady Nanji. Since he decided to face it, he would not hesitate. So he put on the hurricane armor and hurried to the place. This is still an apartment building, but there are no residents in the entire apartment. When he arrived, the outer window of one of the residents opened, revealing a small suitcase on the table behind the window. Nanling didn't think much about it, picked up the suitcase and went to the delivery location. He seemed to be just doing a simple delivery task as usual. After a while, he delivered the things to the place. This is an entrance from the middle area to the lower area, and the surrounding area is very dilapidated. It's not that this place is unsafe, but because it is very close to the lower class area, the residents of the middle class area naturally want to stay away from it. As a result, this place gradually became a mixed bag and became a slum in the middle class area. I don't know if it's an illusion, but this place seems to have taken on some of the dark feelings of the lower class area. Nanling brought the things to the place as usual, and then gently knocked on the window and said, "The things have been delivered, please sign for them." However, he frowned slightly, because the house had been in disrepair for a long time and there were cracks on the windowsill. He was able to hear a conversation behind the window. "Put away your stuff, we're just delivering goods, don't be too nervous." The next moment, there was a sound of guns being put away. Nanling's gas perception even identified the outlines of the 5 people inside. Then the window opened, and he saw the 5 people inside. These 5 people looked gloomy and brought a lot of pressure to people. It was just that it was obviously inconsistent with the outline sensed by his gas perception, and it seemed that some kind of 3-dimensional camouflage was used. Nanling put the suitcase on the ground in front of the window, then stepped back and turned to leave. He frowned as he left, because just now, the firewall that he asked Aunt Leiji to make for his brain core had a reaction. At that moment, someone tried to invade his brain core. So he paused and turned to look at the 5 people and asked calmly, "Just now, were you trying to invade my brain core?" "Yes," he said it so frankly. The 5 people looked at each other, and one of them showed an embarrassed look at the time, and defended himself. "I just want to make sure he is okay," Nanling said lightly. "No matter what your reason is, I have called the police. You have violated my rights. Let's meet in court." As soon as the voice fell, he ran away immediately. The 5 people looked at each other, then picked up the box and rushed into the passage leading to the lower area without hesitation. Nanling smiled slightly when he saw this, knowing that these people might be provoked by Madame Nanji to cause trouble. I just don't know what Madame Nanji's purpose is. Also, I hope they can take a joke less, haha. P.S. I felt better yesterday, so I wrote one more chapter, haha. Chapter 118 Operation Listening. Not long after Nanling left, he received a call from Lady Nanji. It can be seen that his actions seem to disrupt Lady Nanji's plan. The plan has changed. "I need you to prepare with me now." Nanling was stunned for a moment and just said, "Give me a reason." Lady Nanji did not keep him in suspense. She sighed and said, "Let's go together to find the escape boat." Nanling paused for 2 seconds, then said, "Okay, where to meet?" Although this would be risky and might even make him a high-credibility member of Chinyuan 06, a criminal, there is no doubt that he must participate in this. Lady Nanji knew how to convince him. Soon Nanling got an address. He did not rush over immediately, but returned to his residence to leave evidence of entry, and then concealed all the detection methods of this space station and left invisibly. He changed into the same outfit as when he sneaked into the lower area. The faceless camouflage made it impossible to see his facial features and expressions. Then he quietly came to the gathering place, which was the part of the golden axis in the lower area. A bar opened here. Nanling thought this was normal. After all, the golden axis was the place where all kinds of information pipelines and energy pipelines of the entire space station intersected. Only here could the overall information be regulated centrally. He quietly came to the bar, and then came to a secret room behind that bar. Although there were more than a dozen younger brothers guarding the whole process, no one could find that Nanling had passed through. He came to the door of the secret room and was about to reach out and knock on the door. As a result, the door suddenly opened from the inside. But Madame Nanji looked at him in surprise and said, "I thought you should come, but I didn't expect you to be here." Nanling's expression was a little tangled, but he didn't say much, as if all this was a coincidence. He walked into the secret room and saw Tai Long leaning against the wall with his fists clasped and another thin man he didn't know. But after he walked in, the stranger took the lead and asked, "Is it really reliable to accept newcomers without any assessment like this?" Nanling didn't respond. This was Madame Nanji's territory, so naturally she would respond. Even without the need for Lady Nanji to respond, Tai Long had already snorted coldly. "Madam did the review herself, you have no right to question it. And don't forget, you are still in the probation period, take care of yourself first." Nanling confirmed at the time that although the thin man looked fierce and was definitely a ruthless character, he was probably just a cannon fodder. Only then did Nanling say, "Next, what should we do?" He was straightforward and just wanted to get things done quickly, and the shorter the time, the better. Lady Nanji nodded, and then said, "I need you to use your ability to place bombs in these places in the airport. I wonder if you can do it." As she spoke, the topographic map of the airport appeared on Nanling's retina, and then it showed a red dot, which was the location of the bomb. More importantly, these topographic maps are very detailed, and even maintenance drawings are available. With such drawings, it is easy to directly replicate an airport in Chunyuan 06. However, Nanling knew that the explosions in so many places were actually mostly deceptions, just to divert the attention of the security personnel and the White Feather Army in the space station. The real action is probably not here. Of course, Nanling was not interested in knowing the overall plan of Lady Nanji. He just said straightforwardly, "Okay, when do you need me to finish these things?" Lady Nanji said faintly, "It would be best if everything is completed before nightfall today." "Are you sure?" This is a very difficult request. Who would go to the airport to install bombs in broad daylight? What's more important is that the airport of Chunyuan 06 is very busy and there is no difference between day and night. How can he install bombs? But Nanling did not question this. Of course, he took the task and said, "Where is the bomb? Where can I get it?" He was too straightforward, which aroused doubts. Tai Long asked in a deep voice, "Seeing that you agreed so readily, you don't want to take the bomb to call the police?" Nanling understood what was going on as soon as he heard it. He smiled and said, "I just wanted to scare them. I know those people are your guests. How could I really hurt them?" Mrs. Nanji covered her forehead and said, "But they were indeed scared by you. They just broke through the checkpoint and rushed into the lower area, and injured 3 sheriffs for this." Nanling shrugged and said, "It's good that no one died, otherwise I would feel bad." That bad look really made people feel a little at a loss. Mrs. Nanji seemed very tolerant of this, and then said, "Then I will wait for your good news." Nanling nodded, then walked out of the room backwards, and seemed not to want to communicate with them at all. After leaving the room, he entered the invisible state again and went directly to the place where the Dai Ting organization temporarily placed the bomb. It's hard to believe that the bombs were actually placed in the trunk of a floating taxi. I don't know whether to say that the people in the listening organization are too conceited or something else. Nanling disappeared immediately after getting the things. He did not go through the normal airport portal, but the maintenance channel. Nanling did not even need additional drawings to pass through this maintenance channel. The maintenance channel of the airport can be said to be very busy. After all, it is the heart of Chunyuan 06. Someone will inspect it every half an hour. Even so, every time someone inspects and opens a section of the channel, they will feel a breeze blowing by their ears. Of course, this is a very normal thing, and no one cares much. Nanling entered the airport without any trouble, and then walked in when the maintenance channel in the airport was opened. His figure is very agile. Although he can't blend into the wind with a large bag of bombs, it is enough to be invisible. He walked out of the maintenance room in an invisible state, and then looked around the airport hall and determined the bomb placement with his eyes. It can be seen that the way these bombs were installed was not to cause casualties, but to destroy the dog structure to prevent the starships in the airport from entering and leaving. The goal of doing this is also very clear, which is to prevent the support of the White Feather Corps. Nanling quietly came to the huge gate for the starship to enter the port, and then set bombs around the gate. This is not a very complicated operation. He directly used the wind as his hand, grabbed these bombs and stuck them near the gate to ensure that the power of the explosion can completely break the contact and seal it. Then there are the various material warehouses in the airport. These places are to attract the attention of the space station garrison. It is estimated that there will be a lot of losses after the explosion of these warehouses, but Nanling was relieved. This kind of material warehouse is managed by AI, which means that there will be no actual casualties. Nanling felt very comfortable in his heart, and at the same time realized that Mrs. Nanji might not be a kind person, but she undoubtedly took care of his psychology when she arranged a job for him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 119. Take yourself away. After Nanling finished all this, he used the wind escape to escape. Since the hurricane armor was designed to match the wind attribute, he could naturally escape with his spiritual power. However, for safety reasons, he did not go through the gate of the airport. Who knows if there are so many detection devices there that are targeted at spells and spiritual power. This time, he has reaped the benefits of the inert proton material. When the inert proton material is gradually discovered and studied by more people in the future, and targeted detection devices are made, his stealth ability will definitely be greatly reduced. After finishing everything, he went home quietly. In fact, he was only out for half a day. His movements were extremely fast and highly concealed. Naturally, no one was discovered by anyone at present. And then he walked out of the house again, opened the French window of the house with a sleepy look, and showed his face, as if he had just woken up after sleeping for an afternoon. Then he stood at the window without moving, and naturally an AI-controlled floating boxcar came in front of him. That's right, he just called for service. Give me a glass of rice wine, and some small skewers. Well, let's have the set meal. The box cart opened, and the robot chef bowed and responded, "Happy to serve you, sir." As he spoke, the box cart moved towards the window of Nanling's apartment, making Nanling feel like he was sitting in front of a one-person bar when he sat on his own chair at home. This box cart is a snack food truck, which belongs to the catering department of the public service department of Fenyuan Operation Company. It's not easy to open a restaurant these days. Everyone is a little introverted and doesn't like to socialize or go out. Such snack food trucks that serve one person have become popular. The skewers that Nanling ordered are actually artificially synthesized, but because of the many additives, people will feel very addicted to eating. Unfortunately, after all, it's technology and hard work. The upper class prefers to eat light and pure natural food. But Nanling was not picky about it. Instead, he added some gas to the rice wine, and immediately drank and ate skewers with relish, and was very happy. He also clicked on a video and ate and drank while watching the video. He had money and time now, so he spent more than half an hour leisurely, and it was almost dark. Then he sent a message to Madame Namji. "Madam, is there anything else I can do for you today?" He sent this message to prevent someone from monitoring his information and accessing his information records. When Madame Namji saw this message, she naturally understood his intention and knew that his mission had been completed. Nanling deliberately delayed this time and ordered the AI dining car to make himself appear in front of the service robot for such a long time, just to create an alibi. It was a little bit of hiding, and others might not really find out about him, but it was just in case. He was in a good mood, so he simply ordered another set meal B, and continued to drink the rice wine to cheer him up and eat skewers, feeling happy. However, Madame Nanji's actions were faster than he thought. Almost as soon as he sent the message, the airport shook violently, and then a flame shot up into the sky. Nanling was not far from the airport, and he was a high-level official, so he saw the explosion there clearly. He was stunned for a moment, then stood up in shock and looked through the gap of the dining car. Then he hurriedly paid the bill and asked the dining car to leave quickly. "Have a pleasant evening." The robot said goodbye politely. Then Nanling hurriedly closed the window, and then stood at the window and looked in the direction with a concerned look. Well, he acted very well. Although I don't know who he was acting for, he was just showing off his acting skills to the air. Of course, he was not acting all the time. It was indeed quite surprising that Dai Tim was so anxious and made such a big fuss. He looked at the situation over there and saw many security cars whizzing past and heading over there. Then his eyes suddenly condensed slightly. Because he felt a strong divine thought suddenly sweeping over him. Under this divine thought, he had almost nothing to hide, which made him tremble with fear. At the same time, he didn't mind showing a vigilant look, opened the window and looked in the direction of the golden axis. The divine thought came from there, that is, from the upper area. He had heard that the Jindan cultivators stationed there had a way to amplify their divine thoughts. Presumably, the divine thoughts that covered the sky and the sun were the work of the Jindan cultivators in this space station. Fortunately, he was careful, otherwise he would have been exposed. Fortunately, he did not show any signs of being wrong, and the hurricane armor he used was even a standard product that had been registered long ago, so there was no doubt. As for the spiritual weapon Yushu that Fana gave him, well, Fana did not admit that the divine thoughts of the Jindan level would definitely be able to see through it. As the divine thoughts swept over him and then swept into the distance, Nanling breathed a sigh of relief and began to reflect on himself and worry. He was not invulnerable, because he had just accepted a contact order with those people in the morning. However, because of his usual caution, he could be said to have left no flaws. Even if he was summoned to investigate, he was not afraid, unless they were prepared to be unreasonable. He calmed down, and then connected to the news channel of the space station with his intelligence core, ready to see how the news channel reported on this matter. Of course, this so-called frontline report is not very nutritious for him. He was satisfied just by seeing the words "no casualties." But in a flash, Nanling suddenly thought of something, and then quickly began to place orders on the internet to buy things. In fact, the number of people doing the same thing as him is increasing rapidly, because not long after he placed the order, many necessary daily necessities showed out of stock. Sure enough, it is the right choice to stock up a batch of supplies at this time. He is not short of supplies, but to monitor the material distribution of the space station and judge the management status of the space station. He blew up the airport himself, so the external material supply of this space station will be cut off for a while. It can be predicted that the next step will definitely enter the mode of unified distribution of materials. But I don't know what the situation is with Lady Antarctic. As a result, he thought so. The sheriffs who originally rushed to the airport actually returned to the original route and left the airport. Nanling looked at their route. It seemed that they were going to the lower area. He remembered the group of people who rushed into the lower area, and then remembered the newly built research base in the lower area for studying the king insects, and suddenly understood. The airport is a cover for those people. But since those people are here to steal the king bug, how can they leave after bombing the airport? Also, Lady Antarctic said that this is an operation to obtain the escape spacecraft from the year, so how did they act? Nanling was a little confused. At this moment, his intelligence core received a call-up order from the space station. This is a special call-up from the Fen Consortium, requiring him to go to the airport immediately to cooperate with the firefighting and rescue work. This is because there is a shortage of manpower, and they have begun to recruit suitable candidates. Nanling has a high credit value of 95, and he has also worked in Fenyuan Operation Company, so he is the best candidate for recruitment. He did not refuse this. After all, acting should be done in full. He just dawdled on the way out and waited for the supplies he ordered to arrive before leaving. These supplies were all bought by him, and they cannot be wasted. Chapter 120. An accident. Nanling walked slowly all the way to the airport filled with smoke. The fire caused by the explosion had been extinguished, but it was not so easy to eliminate the smoke these days. The task assigned to Nanling after his arrival was also very simple, which was to use wind magic to blow away the smoke and prevent the fire from reigniting. This was assigned according to his ability. After all, the wind-type cultivators in the Foundation building period could complete this level of spell-casting ability by relying on the Wisdom Core. Nanling was also happy to be idle. He and several Foundation building cultivators who were forcibly recruited walked into the airport after the explosion, constantly waving their palms to sweep out the whirlwind along the way, sweeping out the billowing smoke inside. Then a group of people wearing the uniforms of Fenyuan Operation Company rushed in behind them. They brought hundreds of robot assistants and kept checking and busy in the collapsed airport. This was not a rescue team. The people in the airport had been sent out by the robots and staff provided by the airport as soon as the explosion occurred. Now these people are here to check the damage to the main body of the airport and inspect the loss of materials. Nanling didn't care much at first, but at a certain moment, he suddenly felt something in his heart, as if something very familiar appeared, which made him look over there subconsciously. As a result, he saw Lady Nanji. This noble lady was wearing a work suit like others at this time, and was secretly waving at him. Nanling was surprised, but he didn't go over, but just pretended not to see it. This is really an unexpected result. Nanling originally thought that the real target of the people who listened to the truth was in the lower area, but he didn't expect that their real target was still in the airport. To be honest, at first he was ready to be used as a gun, because he really didn't know what method Lady Nanji would use to take back the lifeboat from the Fen Consortium. But now he knows. The old lifeboat should still be in the warehouse in the airport area, or even in those warehouses that were bombed. But in this case, what are those evil guests attracted by the King Bug information? At this time, these people have become cannon fodder to distract the attention of the space station. Nanling did not participate in their plan, but he was able to infer the overall plan of the Dieting organization from the information he knew. This was not because he was smart, but because Madame Nanji deliberately arranged for him to participate in those important links to bring him enough information. In other words, all this information was deliberately revealed to him by Madame Nanji to show him her style of doing things. It was as if she was showing off to him, or showing him something. Nanling calmly followed the others to disperse the smoke. Soon they advanced to the warehouse area, and AI immediately arranged for them to clean up the warehouse area. Nanling's job was also very simple, that is, to exhaust all the oxygen here with others. During this process, his gas perception was turned on throughout the process, and his attention was always following Madame Nanji. Watching her come to a smoking warehouse as if no one was around, and then came to a miniature spaceship about 2 meters long and 1 meter wide in the warehouse. His gas perception could only sense the outline of the spaceship, but could not sense its color. But even so, he seemed to have seen the scene of the year. In this narrow escape ship, the woman was holding a baby and squeezed in, crossing an unknown distance to reach this space station. Nanling took a deep breath, thinking that no matter what the truth was, this woman protected him when he was most vulnerable and gave him the right to survive. Then he saw Madame Nanji taking something out of the escape ship and putting something else in. Then she ran out quickly. Boom. Flames shot up into the sky, and no one knew what dangerous thing caused the explosion. Not long after Madame Nanji rushed out of the warehouse, a terrible explosion occurred there, and unfortunately, it ignited the warehouse next to it, causing a very dangerous explosion. Fortunately, Nanling and several others quickly used wind magic to stop the fire caused by the explosion, otherwise the entire warehouse area would probably become a sea of fire. The scene was extremely embarrassing and chaotic. Nanling only blinked, and Madame Nanji disappeared from his sight, and he could no longer see her. No one knew how she did it. But he was relieved at this point. It seemed that Lady Nanji had achieved her goal. She didn't really want to steal the entire spaceship. Although it was actually just an escape pod, it would be very difficult to take it away. Since she only wanted to replace the motherboard on the escape ship, it was very likely to succeed in the current chaotic situation. After all, the warehouse area of the airport was full of contraband collected over the years. If it really exploded, it would not be a real loss to the Feng family. Next, Nanling was busy like everyone else, acting as a fire brigade. Wherever there was a flame, they would go to put out the fire. Only after they were sure that there was no danger of further outbreaks, they, the Foundation building cultivators who were temporarily recruited, were allowed to leave. The work of counting the losses started quickly, and Nanling heard some news because he was mixed in. To be honest, the actual losses of the airport in this attack were not great. Only some of the main buildings and the entrance and exit gates needed to be repaired. The various important materials piled up in the airport did not suffer much loss. The attackers seemed to just want to cause chaos rather than really anger the Feng family. Well, anyway, this was already a complete anger. Anyway, the late Jindan garrison stationed by the Feng family had already been dispatched in person. However, this Jindan did not come to the airport, so it was obvious where he went. Nanling did not come forward at this time, but chose to return to his residence and wait patiently for further news. Because the divine consciousness of the Jindan cultivator had indeed shocked him before, he would not come out again before the situation became clear. Of course, even so, there were many ways to test. That is to keep calling the AI dining car to serve him. And he ate a lot every time, often 2 or 3 times the amount of a normal person, but he did not touch the supplies he bought at all. This was his test. Even though eating those prepared foods every day made his tongue more and more sick, he could observe the current state of the space station from this aspect. Until the 3rd day, there was really a problem. That was that the AI dining car did not provide him with enough food this time. The robot apologized sincerely and left, while Nanling felt the signs of the collapse of the original management system of the entire space station. When the AI dining car can no longer provide normal catering services, it actually means that the residents of the entire space station have to consider their own food reserves. But the question is, what kind of situation would cause such a change? Nanling felt bad, because based on his understanding of the loss of materials at the airport, it shouldn't be like this. At this time, he thought of someone he could ask for help. It should be said that this is the person he should contact at this time. Miss Fenyi. Chapter 121. It will turn black after being robbed by reality. Although Mo mentioned several times that he could seek help from Fenyi, how could Nanling regard Miss Fenyi as the same person as Fan and I, Mo and others? However, at this juncture, he felt that he should contact Miss Fenyi according to reason. So he made a communication request according to the contact information given by Mo. The communication request was only connected after ringing for a while. Fenyi's lazy voice sounded, "I still remember you. Didn't you want to follow the unlucky guy? Why did you stay again?" Perhaps it was the sequel of the conversation with Mrs. Namji. When Nanling heard Fenyi's voice, he couldn't help but start to profile his psychology. He could hear that there was dissatisfaction in Fenyi's words. Because Nanling was a local of Chenyuan 06, and was recommended to Fan and I by Fenyi, but he didn't come to visit her old leader as soon as Fan and I left and he stayed, which was very annoying. Nanling felt that the other party might still have the intention of taking him in as a subordinate. So at this time he chose to pretend that he didn't know the real reason for Fenyi's dissatisfaction, and directly answered her obvious question. "Ms. Fenyi, I have been following Miss Fan and I for a year, and I have experienced many situations where I almost died." It seems that it is not an obvious answer, but it has already expressed Nanling's complaints clearly. Fenyi laughed ha 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 when she heard it, and she said, "That's right, it's easy to get unlucky if you follow her, so she is called Unlucky and I." She seemed to be missing something. Then he shook his head and said, "Okay, I won't complain about your boss to you. I know you were a die-hard fan of Unlucky and I, and she trusts you very much. Before leaving, in order to ask me to take care of you, she even specially sent a spiritual weapon she refined herself, so if you have any requests, just mention it, and I will do my best for you if I can do it." Nanling was silent for a while after hearing this, and only then did he feel the protection of Boss Fan and I for him. Speaking of which, they should be in the ancient domain now, right? Nanling was absent-minded for a moment. Fenyi sneered, "Why, do you miss Fanny? But you'd better not think too much. We all know how dazzling she is, but she is not a dream that ordinary people can touch." Another person warned him not to have too many thoughts about Fanny, but Fenyi was starting from a more realistic perspective, while Madame Nanji was starting from the perspective of bloodliner. Nanling was speechless for a while, and he replied, "Don't worry, Miss Fenyi, I am devoted to Taoism and will not have too many thoughts about men and women." Originally, he wanted to say that he liked Mo, but he felt that it was not good. How could he really say what was in his heart just to explain something that didn't exist? So he decided to use the matter of cultivation as an excuse. As for why he liked Mo so much, because yesterday, when he was dazed at the entire paid database that Mo left for him, he once had an idea with emotion. It would be nice if I could hear it first. As a result, the database seemed to have received an instruction and told him okay. Nanling felt the love from Sister Mo at the time. That was because she knew that he was poor and allowed him to buy on credit first. Just like that, his actual assets are now negative, and they are at the level of negative millions. Mo is now his biggest creditor, and he must show enough love for such a creditor, otherwise he will feel guilty. Fenyi said, "Very good, this is an admirable ambition. Now, what do you want to talk to me about? Do you want me to help you find out your life experience?" Nanling said, "No, I can find out my life experience myself. Mainly, I want to ask what happened in this space station. I have a bad feeling." He expressed his doubts. Fenyi asked, "How did you find out?" Nanling said, "I was called to the airport 3 days ago, but the airport is still a mess. Today, I found that even the daily food supply of the AI dining car can't be supplied. In other words, there is a problem with the management center of this space station." Fenyi said, "You're indeed a smart man. In this case, I will tell you directly. Something big happened in the lower area. The station elders of the space station were unfortunately killed. Now the top management is in chaos." Nanling couldn't help but frown when she heard her say this lightly. The Jindan stage Karasan day before he even appeared. And looking at Fenyi's expression, it seems that she is not worried at all, as if she doesn't mind this situation at all, and can even be said to be happy to see it happen. Then that chaos in the management, that is not actually a chaos without a leader, but a chaos of power struggle. Nanling suddenly thought of something. Sure enough, at this time Fenyi asked, "Nanlin, I once saved you. Nanling gathered his thoughts and nodded. Yes, at the time I almost died in the hands of the patrol fleet that was in cahoots with the plunderers. Feng Yi nodded with satisfaction and said, "So, can you trust me?" Nanling felt even weirder in his heart. He sighed and said, "Yes, Miss Fanny and Miss Mo both said that I can trust Miss Feng Yi." Feng Yi paused for a moment after hearing this, and seemed to be dissatisfied with this answer, but continued. "I am preparing to completely dispel the darkness shrouding this space station, but I am weak now and need you to help me." Nanling has confirmed that this Miss Feng Yi has begun to turn evil. If the previous few contacts can still see some pure feelings in Feng Yi, then now, when Feng Yi has experienced the trough of life, the temperament she shows at this time is already dark. But Nanling still did not reject Feng Yi, just as he said, this is his explanation to Fanny and Mo. Feng Yi said, "I can't spare any manpower now, but some of my important allies are trapped in the lower area and can't get out. I would like to ask you to go down and bring them out, and provide some protection. I will support you to the greatest extent from a technical perspective." Nanling replied, "Okay, I'll try my best." He didn't say that he would definitely do it. Feng Yi said, "Okay, then I will let my staff contact you. She will tell you what to do and provide you with enough technical support. I hope you can succeed." Nanling responded and didn't say anything more. Compared to Fanny and Mo, who treated him as a true friend or even a little brother, Feng Yi just treated him as a tool that could be used. He didn't mind being a tool, as long as the benefits were enough. However, Feng Yi didn't seem to have discussed the reward with him yet. Nanling immediately had the idea of slacking off. But soon, another voice rang in his ears. "Hello, Nanling, I'm Miss Feng Yi's staff. I will provide you with technical support for this mission." Nanling was stunned at the time. He asked, "Mrs. Nanji?" He never thought that Mrs. Nanji would become Feng Yi's staff. How did she do it? Mrs. Nanji said modestly, "It's me, but I still have to ask you for the next thing." Nanling now understood why Dai Tin and his group seemed to be so comfortable in this space station. It turned out that they were close to the top. Chapter 122. Being a knife. If the previous conversation with Feng Yi made Nanling sigh, then now that he heard that the person communicating with him was Madame Nanji, he was actually relieved. After all, Feng Yi gave him the feeling that although he was dark, he was still dark with pink, which was a little bit lacking. Madame Nanji, on the other hand, was pure even when she was dark. Madame Nanji seemed to know that he had many questions in his mind, so she said, "If you have any questions, just ask. This is an encrypted channel. Even Feng Yi can't know what we are talking about." Very good, the first sentence exposed her dark nature. Nanling thought for a moment, then asked, "How did you get in touch with Miss Feng Yi?" Madame Nanji answered calmly in a gentle voice, "Don't forget that we are the Dai Ting organization. When Feng Yi was doing a big purge in the space station, he came to us to buy intelligence. We have always been good partners. What's more, I have a good personal relationship with that girl." Nanling understood the source of the matter after hearing this, but did not ask what the personal relationship was. He just asked, "What happened in the lower area? Why did it cause such a big mess?" He originally thought that this kind of thing should be settled soon with the intervention of the Jindan garrison, and he himself had no suspicion, and everything would return to calm soon. Who would have thought that the Jindan garrison would die like this? Madame Nanji whispered softly, "After all, it was the younger generation of the Feng family who did it themselves. The one who bought the king insect was actually the industry under Feng Su's name. After all, although the previous fight was a lose-lose situation, Feng Su stayed in the space station and Feng Yi could only manage the mining planet. In fact, he is still the actual winner. But he also suffered losses. It can even be said that he was also expelled from the management of Chenyuan 06. So he urgently spent a huge price to buy this king insect, just to be able to make some achievements in another way, so as not to be crushed by the original mining star managed by Feng Yi." When Nanling heard her say this, he immediately realized, is there something wrong with the king insect? But he didn't quite understand. In his concept, the king insect was just Fanny's little pet, a big soft and white lump. How could it pose a threat? Madame Nanji said, "I just got the news recently. Feng Su, that idiot, is too eager for quick success. He studied the king worm and even tried desperately to use technology to reactivate the dormant gene fragments in the king worm. He actually tried to reproduce the king worm when the Hades locust was at its peak." Nanling groaned and said, "He succeeded." Madame Nanji said, "This kind of success is not difficult. The difficult part is how to do a good job of restraint to ensure safety. Obviously, he didn't do enough in this regard, far from enough." Nanling asked. Then the group of dangerous elements that I scared into the lower area before, Madame Nanji said. That's the allies that little girl Fengyi said. Feng Su hopes to gain points by studying the king worm. How can Fengyi sit still? That group of people was put in by her. In order to compete for the king worm, at least it must be destroyed. Nanling understood. It turned out that there was such a background story. So the disaster situation of this space station at this time was actually caused by the struggle for power between the two heirs of the Feng family. For this reason, Nanling's slight sense of guilt completely disappeared. This was simply the fault of the Feng family, tracking the entire space station down with bad luck. He asked. Then how did the Jindan garrison die? Madame Nanji said. That Jindan was also unlucky. He happened to encounter the revival of the king bug's genes and was ambushed and killed. She said it lightly, but Nanling heard something strange from it. He asked. Is it really a coincidence? Madame Nanji said helplessly. This is definitely a coincidence, because the death of a Jindan garrison is not good news for anyone. Although Fengyi didn't show anything when talking to you, she was actually very anxious. Nanling immediately understood what she meant. So, what Fengyi wants to do most now is to kill people and silence them, right? The silence he said refers to Fengyi's allies. If these people are alive, the investigators sent by the Feng family's main star will definitely find clues and make Fengyi's ugly deeds in this matter exposed. Madame Nanji smiled and said, it's good that you know. My people will do it by then, so you don't have to intervene. Nanling nodded, and then asked, but what does this have to do with me? Why did Miss Fengyi ask me to go on this trip? Madame Nanji said, think about it yourself. Nanling pondered for a while, mainly focusing on his own identity, and then suddenly realized and said, I am here to represent Boss Fanny, or the ancient domain. If those people were killed by me, I don't even need to do it. As long as I participate in it, it will be enough to prevent some unnecessary investigations. Nanling immediately understood that he was indeed a tool man, used to prevent disasters. This kind of thing, how to say it, is really hard to be happy. Madame Nanji said, why, are you uncomfortable about being used? Nanling said, should I express my happiness? Madame Nanji said, actually, this kind of thing doesn't matter. After this is over, do you want to go with me to explore the past? Nanling didn't say anything, but just said calmly, let's talk about it after this is over. It won't end so easily. As he said that, he packed up his equipment and went to the lower area. Because he was connected with Madame Nanji throughout the whole process, he did not show his see-through-the-cracks wind escape attainments, and honestly walked through the main entrance. When passing the checkpoint, he also received weapons and supplies. Because his identity at this time was an investigator of the lower area recruited by Miss Fengyi, it was an official identity. The Jindan garrison was unable to come back. As one of the heirs of the Feng family, it would not be too much for Fengyi to send one of his own people to understand the situation. However, Nanling did not choose firearms, but brought a bunch of explosives, which were packed in a large weapon backpack and carried on his shoulders. He walked into the lower area under the surprised gaze of the soldiers at the checkpoint. As for why he only carried explosives, that was because he had gained experience in bombing the airport. As for guns, those things were actually only medium-range combat weapons. After he established his foundation, energy weapons could actually be eliminated. He was now building the power system in his mind. He carried that 200x40x40 weapon box and entered the lower area. Just entering the lower area, he frowned slightly. Because he had heard some noisy sounds from the wind, which was the roars of the two-headed insects. But the sound sounded different from the sound that Nanling was familiar with. The sound here was louder, more violent, and full of bloodthirsty madness. It's only been 3 days, have so many of them bred? He muttered. The voice of Lady Nanji came to his ears. It's not just 3 days. In the past 2 months, the experimental base has used the king insects to produce many nether locusts. Nanling was stunned. He realized that Lady Nanji used the term nether locust here. In other words, what he will face next will be the terrifying species that once swept across the entire galaxy. Chapter 123. Prepared to take a risk. Nanling once again walked into the darkness of the lower area, which had been completely martial law. The space station should have begun to explode troops. Countless robot guards patrolled back and forth on the dirty streets. Their scarlet electronic eyes showed that they were in a very dangerous combat cruise posture. Any target considered a threat would be hit at the first time. Therefore, it was almost impossible to see a resident of the lower area moving around on the street. They all hid like mice and did not dare to show their heads. Nanling's arrival undoubtedly attracted the attention of these robot guards. After all, his weapon box was filled with dangerous explosives. However, the robot guard's scarlet electronic eyes quickly recognized Nanling's identity, and then they put down their weapons and came to him to salute. "Hello, respected Inspector." Inspector is the identity that Feng Yi arranged for Nanling. It is an official identity that makes it convenient for him to do all kinds of things. Nanling nodded and said, "Continue your work." "Yes, Inspector." The robot guards continued to return to patrol status. The lower area was actually very dangerous at this time. There were countless nether locusts cultivated in that laboratory, and it was very likely that they were all nether locusts with genetic restrictions turned on. It was really difficult to judge how strong they were without having contact with that kind of thing. But Nanling's mission was to check the situation here and try to recover the information in the laboratory. This was a task specially prepared to facilitate Nanling to get close to the attacking team, but Nanling now felt that it might be very dangerous. After all, it was an existence that could kill a Jindan. How could it not be dangerous? But he still went there, not for Feng Yi's mission, but because he really wanted to obtain the information of the laboratory. After all, with his ability, he felt that he could still sneak in secretly. However, he did not take a blind risk, and decided to find a current nether locust to practice first, and then consider it. At this time, Mrs. Nanji had sent a coordinate, which was the current location of the group. Nanling did not say what he was thinking. He was going to contact those people first and see. The entire lower area, or the entire space station, does not have the concept of suburbs. It is just a dense urban cluster. However, most of the buildings in the lower area are dilapidated. And there are sounds of fighting everywhere. It is the machine guards and the nether locusts fighting. Nanling can finally see the shape and combat effectiveness of these nether locusts. Compared with the three-headed ones he saw on Pluto, the overall image of these nether locusts is similar. It's just that the mouth at the bottom is bigger and the fangs are sharper. The sides at the body are covered with bone spurs, and the small head at the tail does not have many barbs. It just looks very smart, as if it has a strong independent consciousness. And their resistance to energy weapons has also been enhanced, and it can even be said to be greatly enhanced. At least the precise attacks of the machine guards he saw could not burn through the external keratin shells of those nether locusts, and it took multiple attacks to complete it. What is more distressing is that they have strong resistance and concealment to energy detection. Basically, as long as they hide in the dark, even the machine guards cannot find their traces, and they will only appear in optical detection after a sudden attack. However, even if it is a sudden attack, Nanling also found that the machine guards can actually fight these locusts on equal terms. The fight here refers to close combat. At least the claws and spikes of the locusts can't easily tear the robot's armor. Nanling evaluated that the combat power of these locusts should be 3 to 5 times that of the two-headed ones on Pluto, which is already an amazing enhancement. Nanling evaluated the strength of the locusts while moving forward. He was also verifying his ability to conceal his breath. He knew before that the two-headed ones have infrared vision, as well as multiple detection methods such as smell, hearing, and magnetic field sensing. The hurricane armor that Nanling is wearing now has the ability to cover up its own magnetic field and infrared heat, and then the lock breath technique can block all his breath and smell. In this way, before the function of the ghost is activated, he has successfully hidden his tracks in front of these locusts. However, in this case, he had to keep the communication completely silent, otherwise any communication fluctuation would attract the attention of these locusts. Not long after, he stopped in front of a ruined building. Then he restored the communication. The elegant voice of Lady Nanji came from inside. "Are you here? Did you encounter any trouble along the way?" At this moment, a shout suddenly came from the house. Who turned on the communication outside? "Turn it off quickly, it will attract insects." Nanling curled his lips and said to Lady Nanji, "Now it's going to be a bit troublesome." Lady Nanji smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, isn't it just right to let them die there?" Nanling said, "No more talking, I'll see those people." He cut off the communication expressionlessly, and then kicked the door directly into the building. The moment he entered the door, he was hit by the concentrated fire of energy beams. But now that the wind shield technique on his waist was opened, coupled with his refraction blessing, these energy beams were all scattered under the refraction of the high-density air shield. The roar of the dark locusts could be heard from outside. Nanling was not in a hurry. He just said, "So it turns out that you are the ones I need to pick up. I should have let you die here." There were 7 people in front of him. 5 of them were scared by him and went straight into the lower level. The other 2 are quite unexpected. They were Tai Long and another thin man recruited by Lady Namji. "You are here. What are your plans, lady?" Tai Long stopped the others who were about to attack and asked between Nanling and the group of people. Nanling relaxed his shoulders a little uncomfortably and said, "Of course I will pick them up. By the way, did you succeed in your mission?" The thin man snorted coldly and said, "You don't need to know this. You just need to do your own thing." Nanling listened to the voice behind him getting closer and closer. He said, "Before this, I did everything well. I never disappoint people." His voice paused, and then he stretched out his hand and threw out a piece of explosives from behind. The explosives spread evenly, and then exploded silently into a sea of fire behind him. The power of this explosion was much stronger than the explosives should have been. The violent impact made the locusts stagger here and there. But there was no sound. Nanling used the warm wind technique and the level 9 wind control technique. The explosives were wrapped in pure oxygen, and the power produced when they exploded was incomparable. The ultimate wind control technique, on the other hand, created a vacuum zone, making it impossible for sound to propagate. Nanling easily dealt with this wave of locusts that surrounded him, because he found the right method. At this time, the leader of the 5-man attack team said, "Our mission is not over yet. I think now is a good opportunity." Nanling said in surprise, "You haven't given up yet?" He seemed very unwilling. The leader of the attackers said, "It's meaningless to leave without completing the mission. Besides, the Feng family's forces are now constantly clearing out these bugs. The swarm of bugs in the experimental base has also rushed out. We can take advantage of the empty rear to continue this mission." Nanling snorted coldly upon hearing this. "You'd better understand the situation. It's difficult for you to even escape now, let alone complete your mission. I won't accompany you." As soon as he finished speaking, he made a gesture to leave. The leader was stunned. Then a shill appeared. Tai Long said lightly, "You will be paid extra." "Good shill." Nanling stopped and asked directly, "How much?" Tai Long looked at the leader of the attackers and signaled with his eyes. Nanling was in a very good mood at this time, and he liked the big guy Tai Long. Chapter 124. In order to survive in the future, Nanling was very satisfied with Tai Long's tacit cooperation. It seemed that this old man was sensible and not as rough as he appeared on the outside. After a negotiation, Nanling received a deposit of 100,000 Lingzhu points from the attack team, and then he seemed to reluctantly agree to carry out this operation with them. The main reason was that these people needed Nanling, an official with an official status, to take them away regardless of the success or failure of the mission, which made them unable to leave Nanling behind to act. But they still felt that they had a chance to complete this mission and seize the king insect. This gave Nanling an opportunity to earn extra income. He didn't like Feng Yi's blackened look, but there was nothing he could do about it, because he himself was also black. That's why he was full of affection for Fan and Mo, who was still pure white. They were all the colors he longed for. The group simply packed up and quietly left this temporary base. It was no longer safe here. Although that wave of dark locusts had been silently blown to death by Nanlin, the dark locusts farther away were already coming here. They went the other way and headed towards the experimental base, preparing to take advantage of the chaos to cause trouble. Everyone was silent on their communications, and no one was allowed to open the communication system, nor could they exchange any information with the outside world. It has long been confirmed that the locusts react very sensitively to various energy waves. The group of people moved forward quietly, all fully armed. The attackers were all in the foundation building stage, including Tailing and the Thin Man. This stage is the largest group of cultivators in the entire human race, because as long as you have 3 sets of equipment, you can at least ensure that you can reach the foundation building stage. However, there are too few people who are capable of breaking through the foundation building stage. The 9th level of the foundation building stage is the first threshold, which can directly screen out 90% of the people, and basically screen out all those who were essentially unsuitable for the path of cultivation. The 10th level is another threshold, and at least 80% of the remaining people will be screened out, which means that in the end, among all those who successfully build the foundation, only 2% can enter the 10th level of the foundation building stage. High-tech means have directly raised the lower limit of cultivators to the 8th level of the foundation building stage, but it is foreseeable that the difficulty of the next upgrade will gradually return to the original track. In fact, even though they were both in the foundation building stage, the gap between people had already been reflected. Many people regarded cultivation as their own weapon, and defined it in the same way as firearms. But Nanling regarded cultivation as a road he was walking on, striding forward, occasionally stopping to look at the scenery on the roadside, but he would never lose his way. The group walked slowly, and then Tai Long approached silently. He didn't say anything, but Nanling already knew what he meant. At this time, no one spoke, which seemed very depressing, and anyone who made a sound could not hide it from others. Only Nanling. He quietly released a breeze and brought his voice over. Mrs. Nanji doesn't want to see them go out alive. They have to let them die more reasonably. Nanling's expression was very simple. But obviously there were some guiding additional contents. For example, let them die more reasonably. No one can say that this sentence is wrong, and it is even an excellent supplement to the instructions of Mrs. Nanji and even Miss Fenyi. But to achieve this, look, isn't what we are going to do now a good opportunity? Talon nodded secretly without saying much. He was wearing a dark matte armor called Iron Rhino. It was obvious that he was going for a violent route. Any movement could give people boundless pressure, like a human-shaped beast. Such a person would always be considered a rough person at first glance. No one would have thought that he would have such a delicate mind. At this moment, Nanling saw Talon suddenly glance at the thin man walking not far from him. The thin man was wearing a rather slender armor, which was a wind-type fast-strike armor called Blade Mantis. At this time, there was also airflow surrounding his body, erasing all the sounds while he was moving. Obviously, he was also an excellent talent for stealth assassination. Nanling was silent for a while, and then a wind voice. Now you can talk. I have temporarily established a communication airway between us. No one except the two of us can hear or even sense it. This is where his confidence lies. The LV9 wind control technique can definitely crush these people. Tai Long asked tentatively. Can't anyone else hear it? Nanling said. You can even try to yell, but I don't recommend that. After all, I will find it noisy. Tai Long took a deep breath and said. Okay, then help me keep that guy there later. Nanling asked unexpectedly. He didn't pass the test. Tai Long said. I don't like him. Very good, this reason is very strong. Nanling asked again. Then you actually trust me? Tai Long said. You are different, the lady trusts you, and can even be said to like you, so I trust you too. Nanling. ... He didn't know what to say. To be honest, his feelings towards Madame Nanji were also very complicated. Although he traveled through time as a baby, the brain of a baby is not fully developed and cannot accept too complicated information. So he has almost no memory of that period. It's just that when he sees Madame Nanji, one or two familiar scenes will occasionally pop up to feel cordial. For example, now he can often recall a scene, that is, he was lying in a small space, embraced by a warm and soft embrace, the wine-red hair hung down, sometimes tickling his nose, but more often exuding a faint fragrance. Nanling came back to his senses in a trance, and then said, Okay, then I will trust you for the time being. Reason told him that he should be vigilant against Lady Nanji and her group, but his emotions always made him let down his guard. This is really distressing. At this time, the person walking in front stopped. The group of people huddled together and whispered. The experimental base is in front. There are no living people in it now. The energy system and other things have been cut off by the insects. They seem to be able to reproduce by directly devouring various energies. We continue to maintain energy silence. Fortunately, our combat armor can still block their perception, but they evolve very quickly. The leader of the attack has explained a lot of things, and Nanling was happy to watch his performance. He came here for only one purpose: to obtain all the research data on the nether locusts. This was the most important thing. Killing these people was just a side job. And he didn't want these data to sell them for money, but was driven by a strong sense of crisis in his heart. Yes, he saw a huge sense of crisis in these nether locusts. When they came out of the historical game and became a reality, Nanling subconsciously thought of the missing Empire insect. This sense of crisis made him want to make some preparations in advance for the dangers that might happen in the future, so that he could continue to live in the future. He decided to take a risk now. Chapter 125. Each with his own agenda, they came to the experimental base built by Master Feng Su specifically for studying the nether locusts, but what they saw was a scene like ruins. It was originally a high-tech base, but now it is all broken tiles and ruins. Many walls have been dug up, revealing the broken energy pipelines inside. Moreover, in just 3 days, the base is full of serious signs of rust. Obviously, this kind of situation should not occur with today's material technology, but this base seems to have experienced millions of years and is decaying rapidly. Many detection equipment cannot be turned on. Nanling simply analyzes the surrounding air with gaseous perception, and soon finds something wrong. The air is full of another component that he is not familiar with. He thought about it, took out a sampling container, and then controlled the surrounding air to purify this component and then gathered it. A wisp of yellow smoke-like substance soon appeared in this transparent container. This should be something secreted by the nether locust, and it is speculated to be some kind of catalyst that accelerates oxidation. Nanling is not sure whether this thing is useful. Now he is just collecting it in advance and looking for an opportunity to find someone capable to study it later. But now the senses are that these nether locusts seem to be deliberately erasing the traces of civilization in their own unique way. This is very terrifying. Nanling even speculated that the existence of these nether locusts was originally shouldering a special mission. This should not be something awakened in this era, but human greed awakened it. Nanling was very worried that something would go wrong, especially since he had also inadvertently contributed to it, so he naturally couldn't just let it go. He turned on all his gaseous perceptions and moved forward carefully in this space, worrying whether the data here would be lost. Looking at the destructive power of these nether locusts, this is really possible. Nanling established wind duct communication with Tai Long again, and he asked, "You came here last time, do you know the location of the main control center here?" Tai Long was stunned for a moment, and then said, "There is no information, but there is still a general guess." "What are you going to do?" Nanling said, "Of course, recover the data. But act according to the situation." Tai Long nodded and stopped talking. A moment later, there was a click-click-click sound of legs landing in front. Nanling's gaseous perception had yielded some results. He whispered, "There are 4 in total. Killing them will attract the attention of all the nether locusts in the base." With his reminder, the entire team immediately changed direction and headed towards another passage. However, they had only walked for a while when they discovered that something was wrong with this passage. First, the degree of rust was even more serious than before, and there were a lot of scratches on the ground and walls. "It looks like a lot of insects have passed by," someone analyzed. "Keep going, this may be the insect path. If you keep going along it, you may be able to find that king insect," the leader of the attack team said with suppressed excitement. Nanling reminded him, "Do you have a way to capture the king insect?" The leader of the attack team said, "A large amount of sting poison is enough to paralyze any life form." Nanling nodded in agreement, and then remained silent. He was not optimistic about this. After all, he had studied the bodies of the two-headed insect and the king insect. At the time, even if they were degraded to the extreme, their bodies had strong adaptability and resistance, and they could survive on a barren planet just by eating soil. Now that their genetic shackles have been opened, their resilience in this regard will probably be even stronger. Continue to move forward, but Nanling's feeling is getting worse and worse. He heard some very serious noises, which were countless insects chirping together, making him irritated. There are many insects ahead. Talon, who had been silent all the time, also said. Nanling used gas sensing to the extreme, and then found a problem. There are really many insects ahead, densely packed in an empty hall. If they bump into them like this, it will be a delivery to the door. Obviously, others also understand this truth, and someone suggested, "There is no way to move forward like this, someone needs to lead all these insects away." This was said to everyone, and it seemed to be pointed. At this time, the Thing Man suddenly said, "We need someone who has a certain ability to hide, is fast and can protect himself. Unfortunately, although I am fast, I cannot hide in front of these locusts. Once I go, I can't come back." This is to easily get rid of himself, and by the way, point the finger of Nanling, who should be his teammate. Nanling frowned, and then said, "I can do this, but I have to pay more." He stated the conditions very frankly, so that these people didn't have to bring them up. Immediately, someone said, "You have the ability to hide yourself in front of these insects, which is very easy for you. This is the key." Even if it is not fully demonstrated, Nanling's ability to hide is already the strongest among those present. Everyone knows that Nanling has this ability, so when the man proposed it just now, he was already looking at Nanling vaguely. As for Nanling's request for more money, the leader of the attack team immediately stopped his younger brother and said very straightforwardly, "Okay, I'll give you another 100,000. But you have to keep your energy silent now, so I can't give it to you. I'll settle it after this mission." Nanling narrowed his eyes and said, No, I'll settle it immediately when I make a noise to attract the attention of all the insects and you start the action. The leader of the attack team breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, it's a deal." Nanling said again, "I still need a helper. If you want to attract the attention of the insects, you have to hold out for a while." The 5 people were silent again. Obviously, they didn't want to separate at the end of the mission. Tai Long said in a muffled voice, "Then I'll go with you. Anyway, my mission is to assist them. They can do whatever they want." The 5 people didn't feel embarrassed because they thought this was the best result. But when Tai Long really took the initiative to volunteer, they were a little confused. But looking at the thin man who suddenly stopped talking, they immediately felt that this was also reasonable. After all, they still have a person with them, so they don't believe that Nanling and Tai Long will really do anything. This is a very magical cognition. Somehow they feel that keeping the thin man by their side can make them feel at ease. Nanling and Tai Long still felt strange when they quietly walked towards another road. He established a wind channel and asked, "Why would they let us go so easily?" Tai Long laughed and said, "Because when I cooperated with them before, I didn't say much, but the thin man jumped very fast." Nanling couldn't help laughing when he heard it. It turned out that they regarded the thin man as someone who could make the decision. This is really an interesting misunderstanding. Or it could be said that Tai Long caused it on purpose. Sure enough, these days, the appearance of those who come out to make trouble is disguised no matter how you look, and they are all black when you cut it open. Nanling said, "Okay, now take me to the main control room here, let's see what's left there." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.